Hey everyone, per your requests, I'm starting Sword of Coming, chapters 511 through 520 of the previous episode. In the capital of Southern Garden Nation, Qian Pingyan and the scholar Lu Tai find themselves targeted by a group of ruthless bandits. During a chaotic skirmish, Lu Tai reveals his true identity and immense power, yet Qian Pingyan holds his own, demonstrating the fruits of his relentless martial arts training. As the conflict escalates, Qian draws on his deep resolve and the teachings of his past masters, ultimately defeating his powerful assailants with a stunning display of fist intent. Following these events, Qian and his companions navigate the intricate political and spiritual landscape of the region, interacting with figures ranging from local water goddesses to formidable elite cultivators. Amidst the tension and battles, Qian discovers the true depth of his martial path, as the experiences of his journey and the memory of Ningyao fortify his spirit. He continues his trek northward, leaving the chaos behind, and eventually reaches Stalactite Mountain, now fully prepared to ascend toward his next destination. If possible, you can support me via PayPal or become a channel member to help me keep this channel running. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story of Sword of Coming audio series. Chapter 521. A wry smile appeared on Wang Qi's face as he replied, "That certainly sounds like a perfectly reasonable explanation, and perhaps it would be enough to fool Lu Zhan, but there's no way our mountain master would believe it. Just do as I say and make sure you don't reveal your true demonic form. All you have to do is force Qian Pingyan into displaying the slightest sign of weakness, and I'll make sure that he doesn't leave this place alive." "Alright, I hope you can do as you say and kill Qian Pingyan in one fell swoop, rather than just talk big with no follow-up," the brawny man scoffed. He then burst into laughter as he jibed. "What am I saying? I almost forgot that all you scholars do is talk. In fact, all of you are unmatched when it comes to your ability to talk and preach." Wang Qi paid no heed to the brawny man's jibes. The brawny man stepped forward, and with each step that he took, the mountain summit would tremble violently. He didn't care at all whether Qian Pingyan would notice the commotion that he was causing, and in the blink of an eye, he had already thrown himself off the cliff on the mountain summit before crashing down onto the ground with a resounding thump. Meanwhile, Wang Qi heaved a faint sigh with a concerned look on his face. Even the mightiest of trees was destined to fall someday, and the golden core that he had painstakingly cultivated was beginning to dim. He possessed a vast wealth of knowledge that he was still yet to share with the world, so how could he die at a time? In particular, golden core tier cultivators were far more sensitive to their lifespans than mortals who had no idea when their day of reckoning would come. Qian Pingyan wasn't deaf, so he naturally didn't overlook the commotion that the brawny man caused while jumping down from the mountain. With his branch in his left hand, he patted his sword nurturing gourd with his right hand, and 1st and 15th flew out from within, vanishing out of sight. He then reached into his sleeve with his right hand to pull out a golden talisman, the Treasure Pagoda demon-suppressing talisman that Zhong Kuei had inscribed for him. A piece of talisman paper of this caliber was something so precious that Burial River Goddess had only received a single piece from the Great Quan Empire when Green Roving Residence was first established. Among the 3 pieces of golden talisman paper given to Qian Pingyan by Zhang San, this was the one with the Dragon Claw seal script. Qian Pingyan didn't know who was coming, but fate worked in very coincidental ways at times, and it couldn't have been more fitting that a demon-suppressing talisman that had been inscribed in Green Roving Residence was being used on a water demon that had been terrorizing Burial River for many years. As for 1st and 15th, Qian Pingyan was keeping them on standby to ward off any potential attacks from Wang Qi. Meanwhile, Wang Qi was still standing on the other mountain summit with a forlorn expression. He was hoping that after successfully killing Qian Pingyan here, and obtaining the immortal mantra that he desired, he would no longer have to involve himself with these worldly affairs. He would be able to focus wholeheartedly on his cultivation, and he could make amends for what he had done once. He became a deputy mountain master of Great Subduing Academy. There was a young Taoist priest wearing a hibiscus hat. Instead of flying through the air, he was shrinking the land with each step that he took, and it didn't take long before he crossed the border of the Great Quan Empire to arrive in the southern region of northern Jian Nation. After that, he continued southward, then picked out a peaceful and secluded forest, where he stopped on a mountain summit before vanishing into thin air. It was an entirely different world underground. There seemed to be a buried ancient path here, and the young Taoist priest walked for thousands of kilometers along the underground path. There were countless other paths branching off from this winding path, but the young Taoist priest was able to navigate his way through the labyrinth without any hesitation. The young Taoist priest encountered many pieces of eerie or wondrous underground scenery along the way, but none were enough to make him stop even for a moment. In the end, he arrived in front of an extremely dilapidated gate, above which was a lopsided plaque missing a decent chunk, and what remained of the plaque carried the words "Profane Departure Palace." As soon as he stepped inside, a burst of faint sword chi abruptly emerged before vanishing just as quickly. The entire place was filled with ruins, and the young Taoist priest slowly walked along. Flying Eagle Fortress, Green Roving Residence, Fox Town. Aside from the inn that Zhonyang was in, the other two places weren't of much consequence. To put it more accurately, the Flying Eagle Fortress was once an extremely important place, but that was all in the past and he didn't want to think about it now. During his journey through Parasol Leaf Continent, he had constantly been spreading certain seeds, but as for whether those seeds came into fruition, he didn't actually care at all. The keys to his plan on Parasol Leaf Continent were the two great demons in Planchette Writing Sect and on Peace and Tranquility Mountain. However, he had discovered that there was a completely oblivious fellow who had trodden repeatedly on the great Tao that he had passed through. Perhaps once or twice could be attributed to coincidence, but this had happened on too many occasions to be ignored. He had to be careful. Otherwise, if the soul of his true body back home was too severely taxed, he would be unable to wake up for several centuries. If that happened, then he would miss out on this opportunity, one that could hardly be seen in 100 millennia. Missing this opportunity would render him unable to secure those unimaginably delectable and fertile plots of land for his descendants, and that would be entirely unacceptable. At the end of the path in this abandoned palace was a site similar to a dragon-locking platform from ancient times, and Bai Yuan was seated there with his legs crossed. His clothes were in tatters and he was covered in blood. An unconcealable aura of violence was surging out of his body, but whenever wisps of this aura attempted to drift their way out of the giant stone platform, they would immediately be struck and erased by arcs of white lightning that appeared out of nowhere. Bai Yuan had fled all the way to this place, and there was no longer a sword on his back. "Why have you come here to find me?" Bai Yuan asked. "Are you not afraid that both of us will die here?" The young Taoist priest strode over to the edge of the dragon-locking platform, but refrained from stepping onto it, and he smiled as he said, "Rest assured, there's an old geezer back home, and he told me long ago that you're a man who's blessed by fortune, and that you won't die anytime soon." "What do you want?" Bai Yuan asked. The sight of this young man was a very frustrating one for Bai Yuan. All those years ago, the young man somehow completely altered his own appearance, posing as a young boy who suffered from amnesia, and he managed to catch the eye of a golden courtier cultivator from Peace and Tranquility Mountain, who took him up the mountain. From there, he was able to fool everyone and make his way into the ancestral hall, where he even received a precious jade tablet. Prior to Huang Ting, he was the one regarded as the most likely to reach the unpolished jade tier, and there were incredibly high hopes resting on his shoulders. The speed with which he broke through his golden core and nascent tier bottlenecks astounded even those in the ancestral hall of Peace and Tranquility Mountain, and they even went as far as to find a precious treasure for him to conceal his aura so that he didn't draw the attention of Parasol Leaf Sect and Jade Tablet Sect. After reaching the nascent tier at a young age, he dedicated himself wholeheartedly to subduing demons and eliminating fiends on his cultivation journey, earning himself an extremely stellar reputation in the process. One day he decided for some reason that the time was right. He revealed his astonishing true identity to Bai Yuan in the Well prison, and he instructed Bai Yuan to intentionally release a great demon on the bottom level of the Well prison. A battle ensued between the two, and both combatants emerged in grievous condition. At the time, the young man was an earth immortal not yet 100 years of age, yet he ended up on the brink of death, and there was no way to recover his waning vitality. In fact, his condition was even worse than that of a 1,000-year-old nascent tier Earth Immortal. After that, the young Earth Immortal left Peace and Tranquility Mountain to travel the world in search of a cure for his own condition. It was during this journey that he encountered that golden core tier cultivator from Planchette Writing Sect, and the latter summoned the avatar of an almighty ancient demon, paying the price of losing any chance of entering the cycle of reincarnation. At the end of the battle, the young earth immortal met his demise, and not even a single shred of his body remained. The jade tablet from the ancestral hall of Peace and Tranquility Mountain was gone, and the treasure used to conceal his aura was also destroyed. The young Taoist priest sat down on the steps leading up to the stone platform, facing away from Bai Yuan as he smiled and said, "Zhong Kuei and Huang Ting must die, particularly Zhong Kuei. If he doesn't die, he'll surely go on to become a mountain master of a Confucian school, and that'll be just the beginning of our concerns. In the wake of the battle, countless living beings will lose their lives, and it will be the turn of ghosts and spirits to roam the earth. Back in our hometown, there just so happens to be an old geezer who can take advantage of that. If Zhong Kuei is present during the battle, then we could lose as many as this number of you." He raised 3 fingers as he spoke, then continued in a grim voice, "And that's at the very least." He then raised the 2 remaining fingers of his hand to present 5 fingers in total as he concluded, "It's actually this number. I only showed 3 just now because I didn't want to startle you." Bai Yuan was completely unconvinced. 5 Bai Yuans meant 5 12th-tier swordsmen. He had managed to kill Zhong Kuei with just 3 strikes, so how could Zhong Kuei possibly possess sufficient power to kill 5 of him? The young Taoist priest gently patted his knees with his hands as he continued, "Even though you're hiding like a rat now, at least you have something to look forward to. In contrast, that scoundrel from Planchette Writing Sec spoiled my plans, and he's been pursued all the way out into the sea, deservedly so, might I add. He doesn't possess as much fortune as you do, and even in the sea, he's still not going to be able to escape death. Now, it's just a matter of which of his 2 pursuers will be able to reap the spoils from his demise." Having said that, as a 12th-tier cultivator, a desperate final blow from him is nothing to be scoffed at, and perhaps he could even take down one of those 2 with him, so I won't punish his descendants once I return home. Bai Yuan's brows furrowed slightly as he asked, "Even I can't find that Confucian sage presiding over Parasol Leaf Continent, so wouldn't it be even more difficult to find you? Why are you in such a hurry to leave?" The sage he was talking about was one of the 72 sages worshipped in Confucian temples. Even though his duty was to oversee the matters unfolding on Parasol Leaf Continent, all he saw was a couple of sparks here and there. Even in the case of the battle on Peace and Tranquility Mountain, the sage in question only saw the emergence of 2 slightly larger sparks, and that prompted him to use his mystical powers to set his sights on Peace and Tranquility Mountain. It was extremely difficult for immortals to preside over territories, particularly when those territories spanned over multiple nations and continents, all of which had invisible natural barriers between them. The young Taoist priest clasped his hands behind his head, then lay back against the stairs as he continued, "In order to prevent Peace and Tranquility Mountain from searching for this ancestral hall hibiscus hat that I'm wearing, I had to intentionally ruin it. Originally, it would have been able to last 50 or 60 more years, but now that that Confucian sage has preemptively descended into the world, it's hard to say how much longer I'll be able to maintain the status quo. If he tries to find me, then he'll definitely be able to do so. There's definitely a higher power pulling the strings behind the scenes, instructing the 3 great demons of Parasol Leaf Continent. Before he finds me, I have to do some more things. Seeing as my plan has failed, at the very least I have to leave behind something for them to remember me by. For example, I have to kill Chun Ping'an or Huang Ting, or preferably both. There's no hurry, we'll see how it goes." Bai Yuan offered no response. Hatching plots was not his forte. The young Taoist priest smiled as he continued, "I'll only be able to retain a chance at victory if I'm found. Of course, I can't let them find me too easily. Otherwise, they'll become suspicious of me. In order to avoid arousing suspicions, I have to make that Confucian sage go to great lengths to find me. I have to make them slowly track me down by using the deaths of Chun Ping'an and Huang Ting as leads. Otherwise, if I scurry back home with my tail tucked between my legs, then I'll truly have completely and utterly lost. If that happens, I'll be in for a very hard time. Perhaps I'll be banished to that mountain range to fend for myself, then be forced to serve as a manual laborer for that blind man. Just the mere thought of that is getting me on edge." Bai Yuan was also a little spooked as the thought of that ancient legend from Savage World sprang into his mind. "I must admit, I'm a little homesick," the young Taoist priest mused. "There are too many rules and inhibitions here. Not only do I have to constantly be wary of the prowling Confucian sage, I also have to worry about the abbot of the observing Tao temple. It really is all quite a massive pain. If it weren't for the abbot, my plans for Parasol Leaf Continent would be much easier to implement. There would be no need for me to constantly have to worry about attracting his attention. Huang Ting is a lucky girl. With my demise serving as a cautionary tale, she was thrown into the Taoist temple by that short-tempered grand elder of ours. If it's possible, I really want to see that grumpy old fart. His voice abruptly cut off there. While in the rundown temple, Pei Qian suddenly clasped her hands over her eyes while rolling around in pain, and it seemed as if the light of the sun and the moon were spilling through the gaps between her fingers. Moments later, a tall, elderly Taoist priest appeared near the underground dragon-locking platform with a cold sneer on his face. Over in the sea to the west of Parasol Leaf Continent, a great demon had revealed its gargantuan true form, and it was fleeing in a panic, raising enormous waves in the process. It was being pursued by several figures, while a swordsman in a very foul mood was flying in from the opposite direction. He didn't want to serve as a Tao guardian for anyone, but deep down in his heart, he was also concerned that the messy state of Parasol Leaf Continent would bring harm to the young man upon whom little Qi had placed all of his hopes. He didn't want to show himself in the world, so he was flying over the sea to take his mind off things. His name was Zui Yu, and even though the wounded great demon was making an effort to get out of his way even as it fled for its life, he was in such a foul mood that he slew it with a single slash of his sword anyway. After securing approval from Chen Ping'an, Wei Xian sprang forward in his West Mountain Dew armor, attempting to charge straight into the enemy ranks to slay Lu Tsong, even preparing to lose his own life in the process. Meanwhile, Su Qingzhou had immediately decided to retreat after Su Tong was killed by Sui Yubian, even though he knew that doing so would bring down the wrath of Lu Tsong upon his clan. Upon his return to Mirage City, he was planning to discuss how to proceed from here with his grandfather, who was a great general in his own right. As one of the most prominent military clans of the Great Quan Empire, the Su clan had already established itself for several generations in Mirage City, so even though Su Qingzhou was wary of Lu Tsong, the Su clan was certainly not going to be a pushover. At this point, the emperor was still Lu Zhan, not Lu Kong. Even if Lu Tsong really did insist on turning on the Su clan would just have to pledge its allegiance to the second prince instead. Over where Lu Baixiang was on the battlefield, the battle was still raging with ferocious intensity. As expected of Lu Tsong's most trusted soldiers, these 5,000 troops were aware of just how unforgiving martial law was, and even though they were absolutely terrified as they watched their comrades being cut down one after another, they were still charging ahead with single-minded determination, despite knowing that they were rushing straight to their deaths. Even the martial arts masters and cultivators lurking in the shadows could hardly bear to watch any longer, and tears were streaming down the faces of even some of the most battle-hardened commanders, mixing with the rain that was still pelting down from above. Even so, they still performed their duties with the utmost diligence, executing any deserters on the spot. There were some poems that could perhaps capture the ethereal grace and flair of immortals, but no poem had ever been able to truly encapsulate just how brutal and horrific a battlefield could be. After jumping off the other mountain, the water demon from Burial River made a beeline straight for the mountain where Chen Ping'an was, slapping away all of the trees in his path. Chen Ping'an was already prepared to take on this new assailant, and as an extra precautionary measure, his right hand was now holding 3 talismans stacked together rather than a single one. Prior to inscribing the talismans, Zhong Kuei had taken in a breath of righteous energy, and his inscriptions consisted of over 100 cavalry clad in suits of silver armor, riding white horses. The long string of tiny cavalry rushed out onto the sheet of talisman paper and arranged themselves into a formation, where they remained, waiting for the talisman to be used. After that, Chen Ping'an had supplied Zhong Kuei with 3 more pieces of talisman paper out of his own pocket, 2 pieces of golden paper and a piece of azure paper. Zhong Kuei had reluctantly complied with Chen Ping'an's requests, inscribing a 5 lightning righteous technique talisman from Heavenly Master Residence of Mount Longhu, a barrier-shattering talisman that prevented the phenomenon of ghosts hitting the wall, and 1 final sword-suppressing talisman of tremendous power, one that Zhong Kuei proclaimed was capable of stirring up all of the seas of the 9 continents. At this point, the Burial River water demon was already no more than 100 steps away from Chen Ping'an. Qian Ping'an slowly emerged from under the eaves of the temple and turned to his right. With a flick of Qian Ping'an's wrist, all three of the talismans in his hand were ignited by a breath of pure true qi, and he thrust them toward his approaching assailant. The brawny man continued to charge onward without pause as he erupted into laughter, and he sprang up into the air. "What's a martial artist like you doing playing with talismans? Are you trying to defeat me by making me laugh to death?" However, his laughter then quickly subsided. After the 3 golden talismans had been incinerated into nothingness, the brawny man discovered that 3 talismanic projections were now revolving around him. At this point, he was still high up in the air, and he hurriedly sank his true qi into his dantian to accelerate his own fall. As soon as he crashed down onto the ground, a projection of a silver-armored general on horseback sprang out of each of the 3 talismans before charging at him. "Die!" the brawny man roared as he spun around in a circle while throwing 3 punches in rapid succession at the oncoming assailants. However, more and more cavalry continued to rush out of the talismans in batches of 3 at a time, and it seemed that there was no end to them. Despite this, the brawny man was completely unfazed as he continued to lash out with his fists, killing the oncoming cavalry over and over again. Whenever he tried to go anywhere, the 3 talismans would follow him while continuing to maintain the same distance from him. The 3 talismans almost served as a training aid that allowed the brawny man to fight to his heart's content, and he was thoroughly enjoying himself. The 3 cavalry circling city talismans were more than capable of temporarily trapping a river demon on the cusp of the golden courtier, and they could perhaps even force the river demon to reveal its true form, but they were definitely not going to be able to kill the river demon on their own. Qian Ping'an was naturally well aware of this, and he was never under the illusion that the 3 talismans would be enough to kill the brawny man. Wang Qi was patiently waiting for any sign of weakness from Qian Ping'an that he could exploit, and Qian Ping'an was also doing the same, waiting for an opportunity that he could pounce on to land a killing blow on the brawny man. The rain was still pelting down with no signs of abating anytime soon, but the brawny man was already becoming very frustrated. Was there truly no end to the troops rushing out of these talismans? He had already lost count of how many of them he had killed. Was it 150? 200? As the battle wore on, a sense of foreboding began to well up in his heart. Qian Ping'an had been constantly standing a safe distance away, and it was clear that he wasn't waiting for him to break through the formation of talismans so that they could have a fair and square one-on-one battle. In particular, the branch in Qian Ping'an's hand was very unsettling in his eyes. It didn't appear to be remarkable in any way, but he was convinced that there was more to it than met the eye. It was clear that Wang Qi wasn't going to get involved in this matter, and the brawny man had no obligation to answer to Great Subduing Academy. At this point, he had already sustained many tiny wounds, and the rain was about to die down soon, which meant that there was only a small window of time left during which he would be at the height of his powers. With that in mind, the brawny man's eyes turned fully white, and his muscles also began to bulge and warp. His intentions were very clear, and Wang Qi immediately yelled out in a furious voice, "Stop!" However, the brawny man paid no heed to Wang Qi as he fully transformed into his true form. His body swelled to over 300 meters, and his eyes were as large as lanterns. The ground was trembling beneath his feet, and as he had grown in stature, the 3 cavalry circling city talismans had distanced themselves further and further away from him, but they were still releasing a steady stream of cavalry at him. Some of the Great Quan Empire soldiers were lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike, but they were sent flying by the eel demon's enormous body, and dozens of them were injured or killed on the spot. The rain flowed down the river demon's body, but instead of seeping into the mud, it quickly formed a pool around the great demon. Qian Ping'an was able to identify the great demon as the same eel demon that had battled against the burial river goddess, and that confirmed to him beyond a doubt that the other figure still hiding on the other mountain summit was none other than Wang Qi. Qian Ping'an held the 5 dragons holding Jewel's talisman between his fingers, injected it with true qi, then tossed it at the river demon. Sure enough, 5 slender dragons over 30 meters in length flew out of the talisman. Each of them had a white jewel clasped in its mouth, and lightning revolved around the jewels. The river demon was thinking that it would be able to dominate the rest of the battle now that it had revealed its true form, only to discover that 5 formidable flood dragons had appeared above its head. After a brief moment of stunned silence, it let loose a thunderous roar and began to struggle with all its might, trying to break free from the encirclement of cavalry circling city talismans so that it could escape from the flood dragons overhead. The cavalry units continued to charge forward and thrust their spears into the eel demon's body over and over again, even as they continued to be eradicated by the great demon. One of the flood dragons opened its mouth up wide, and a white lightning jewel shot out from within before smashing into the river demon's head. The mountain summit shuddered as two more lightning jewels struck the river demon on the neck and tail, causing the river demon's soul and golden core to tremble along with its body. The only silver lining for him was the tremendous force of the explosions had finally destroyed those three accursed cavalry circling city talismans. A long streak of azure light flew over from the other mountain summit, then descended onto a tree branch near Changping before proposing, "Let's both take a step back and end things here, and I'll convince Lu Tsong to retreat with his troops right away. What do you say?" Wang Qi was making this proposal through tightly gritted teeth, and he wanted nothing more than to skin the bull-headed river demon alive. With each lightning jewel that was released, the corresponding flood dragon would fade away on its own. Yet Changping displayed no intention of stopping. The final two flood dragons also released their lightning jewels without any hesitation, and even after all 5 of the flood dragons had disappeared, the 5 jewels could still be seen embedded firmly into the river demon's body, extending all the way from its head to its tail to form a line. Lightning was traveling along the 5 jewels, forming a thick bolt of lightning that was almost the same size as the river demon's enormous body. At the same time, 1st and 15th had also been summoned onto the battlefield at Changping's behest, and each of them pierced its way into one of the river demon's eyes. Simultaneously, Sui Yubian had plunged deep infatuation into the river demon's head with unerring accuracy. The sword simply passed straight through before piercing into the ground below, displaying its incredible sharpness. Meanwhile, Wang Qi and Changping had sprung into action at almost the exact same moment, both with the intent to kill. Changping slashed his branch through the air like a sword, while all of the storm seemed to have completely fallen under Wang Qi's control, with all of the rain droplets veering off their original trajectories to converge toward Changping. In the next instant, Wang Qi could no longer be seen on the tree branch, and Changping was standing where the noble scholar had been just a moment ago. A burst of ripples then erupted out of his Dao robe, scattering all of the rain droplets clinging to it. Wang Qi had fled the battle. The river demon was on the brink of death, and it was no longer able to control the pool of rainwater that had collected around it, so the water was seeping into the soil along with its profusely flowing blood. The branch in Changping's hand disintegrated into dust. He sprang onto the river demon's head, then made a grabbing motion to summon deep infatuation into his grasp, following which he decapitated the river demon in a single swift slash. The rain slowly subsided, and the Great Quan Empire's troops began to retreat back down the mountain. Ultimately, Wei Xian was unable to capture Lu Tsong. Instead, Lu Tsong was able to retreat to the foot of the mountain, while one of the swordsmen under his command held off Wei Xian at the cost of his own life. Out of the 4, Zhu Lian was the one with the most severe injuries, but he didn't die even a single time. Lu Baixiang began to make his way toward the body of the river demon, and only now did he get a chance to sheath halting snow and pull out the arrows that had pierced him. Instead of throwing the arrows away, he held on to them. On the sea to the west of Parasol Leaf Continent, the great demon fleeing for its life had just been slain on the spot by a single sword strike, and its gargantuan head fell off its shoulders before sinking into the sea, while its mountainous body remained floating on the surface of the sea, bobbing up and down with the waves. The 3 Parasol Leaf Continent cultivators who had pursued the great demon up to this point were unsure what to make of this situation. Sect leader Songmao of Peace and Tranquility Mountain cupped his fist in a grateful salute as he greeted. "Thank you for helping us slay that great demon, Senior. I am Songmao of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. May I ask your name?" However, the swordsman flatly ignored Songmao's greeting. One of the people accompanying Songmao was a Grand Elder of Parasol Leaf Sect responsible for overseeing the rules and the genealogical records of the sect, and there was currently an uncertain look on his face. During the hunt for this great demon, Songmao was the only one who had wholeheartedly dedicated himself to the cause, determined to hunt down the great demon, even if it meant having to forfeit his own life in the process. However, even though he was the sect leader of Peace and Tranquility Mountain, His cultivation base wasn't actually all that advanced, and due to the recent incident that had taken place in the well prison on the mountain, he didn't dare to bring one of the mountain guarding immortal swords with him, so there simply wasn't much that he could do with his limited abilities. As for the Grand Elder of Parasol Leaf Sect, he didn't want to take any excessive risks in hunting down the Great Demon, which had still been at the 11th tier even after falling down a tier. Its body was enormous and extremely resilient, making it very difficult to take down. However, its fate was already sealed, and there was no way that it would have been able to escape from the trio, so his plan was to take things slowly and wear down the Great Demon over time. Hence, from his perspective, this was a mission with minimal risk involved, yet great rewards to be reaped. Not only would he be doing a great deed by slaying this Great Demon that had wreaked havoc in Planchette Writing Sect, he would also become a benefactor to sect leader Jian Lai of Planchette Writing Sect. Hence, even though he hadn't truly gone all out to hunt down this Great Demon, he had still been very much determined to take it down. The third person to round out the trio was the leader of the Jiang clan from the Cloud Cave Blessed Land. In terms of physical appearance, he was even younger and more handsome than his only son, Zhang Beihai. At this moment there was a wide smile on his face, and he was clearly in a very good mood. Now that the Great Demon had been slain by the mysterious swordsman, Parasol Leaf Sect Grand Elder's plans had completely fallen through, and that was exactly what he wanted to see. For the sake of his good friend Lu Feng, he had traveled in secret to the Lotus Flower Blessed Land, and he had essentially gone missing from Parasol Leaf Continent for 60 years. During that time, many dissenting voices against him had arisen in Jade Tablet Sect, and that was why he had been forced to re-emerge. However, they were expecting him to work without any compensation, so he was naturally taking a very half-hearted approach. Song Mao was a little displeased by the swordsman's rude demeanor, but he knew better than to let his emotions get in the way of his decision-making. The swordsman clearly wasn't intimidated by the mention of Peace and Tranquility Mountain at all, and there had to be a reason for his haughtiness. The only problem was that Song Mao couldn't think of any swordsman in Parasol Leaf Continent that matched this man's description. He couldn't figure out who this man was, nor was he able to ascertain the man's motives for stepping in to kill that Great Demon. Had he slain the Great Demon in order to claim the merits for the feat, or had he simply done so out of a sense of justice? Alternatively, could it be that he wanted to claim certain prized parts of the Great Demon's body, or even claim the entire body for himself? Song Mao naturally didn't care about claiming the Great Demon's body, but it was clear that this demon and Bai Yuan were the main culprits for the major unrest that had recently swept over Parasol Leaf Continent. Hence, he had to take its body back with him to be inspected by a Confucian academy, then have the academy employ the services of a naturalist to conduct divination on the body. With that in mind, Song Mao was temporarily at a loss for how to approach this situation. The strange swordsman turned to the Grand Elder of Parasol Leaf Sect and asked, "What's that look you're giving me? This Great Demon would have been best kept alive so that I could take it back to Parasol Leaf Sect with me for interrogation. Perhaps I could have uncovered an even larger conspiracy. However, now that you've slain it, the leads have run dry, so how are we going to uncover the mastermind behind all of this now?" The smile on the face of the Jiang clan leader remained unchanged, and he was eager to see a conflict arise. Song Mao was just about to say something when the swordsman declared in an indifferent voice, "If you're not convinced, then fight me." This was completely unbecoming of a swordsman of his caliber. One would struggle to find even a chi refiner of the middle 5 tiers behaving in such an abrasive fashion. In fact, he was carrying himself much more like an uncouth martial artist. Before Song Mao had a chance to try and play the role of mediator, the swordsman lashed out once again, this time at the Grand Elder of Parasol Leaf Sect. The Grand Elder's expression changed drastically as he hurriedly summoned a bonded treasure of his that he had been refining for over 1,000 years, and it was an ancient ceremonial bell that he had obtained from a broken small world. The bell was considered to be the foremost of the 8 instruments. This one was an antiquated copper bell no taller than the length of a human arm, yet its Tao manifestation was over 100 feet tall, and it encompassed the Grand Elder's entire body within it. Engraved onto the outer wall of the bell was a sacred passage inscribed by an ancient Confucian sage, and at this moment, the fist-sized characters of the passage of text were rapidly revolving over the surface of the bell's Tao manifestation. The Grand Elder thought that the Bell's Dao manifestation would at least be able to contend momentarily against the streak of oncoming sword qi, but to his shock and alarm, the Dao manifestation was instantly split apart, and he hurriedly flew back in retreat along with the antiquated bell, hoping that the sword qi would diminish once he retreated to a sufficient distance away. In the end, he was forced to retreat for close to 10 kilometers, and the entire sea was parted by the sword qi, creating a rift that stretched all the way from the swordsman to the Grand Elder. By the time the streak of sword qi finally faded away, the Grand Elder was left rooted to the spot with a stunned expression on his deathly pale face. At the same time, a pained look flashed through his eyes at the sight of the tiny mark that had been scratched onto the surface of the copper bell. This was going to take an astronomical amount of resources for him to repair. How could such a casual sword strike from the swordsman have been imbued with such immense power? Such a formidable sword immortal definitely didn't exist even on Southern World Continent, let alone Parasol Leaf Continent or Eastern Treasured Vial Continent. Even the likes of Chao Shi most certainly wouldn't have been able to unleash such fearsome sword qi. Having been forced back so far into retreat, the Grand Elder of Parasol Leaf Sect was no longer serving as an eyesore for the swordsman, so he turned his attention to the leader of the Jiang clan as he remarked, "You seem to be thoroughly enjoying the show." The smile on the Jiang clan leader's face instantly stiffened as he cupped his fist in an apologetic salute. "Please forgive me for my rudeness, Senior." "Senior? You're far older than I am," the swordsman scoffed. The leader of the Jiang clan was renowned for his shamelessness in the cultivation circles of Parasol Leaf Continent, and his expression remained unchanged as he replied in a serious voice, "On the path of cultivation, seniority is decided by power, not age. I wouldn't dare to compare myself to you, Senior." The swordsman paid no further heed to the leader of the Jiang clan as he cast his gaze toward the Grand Elder of Parasol Leaf Sect in the distance. "You seem to be carrying an offensive treasure of a decent caliber. Let me take a look at it." At this point, it had become abundantly clear that the swordsman had a very short temper, even more so than the heavenly lord of peace and tranquility mountain, so the Grand Elder of Parasol Leaf Sect naturally didn't dare to reveal the treasure. If he were to do so, the follow-up from the swordsman would most likely be something along the lines of, "That's quite a nice treasure, I wonder how it matches up against my sword." In that situation, what was he supposed to do? If he backed down from the challenge, then he would be embarrassing himself in front of people from both Jade Tablet Sect and Peace and Tranquility Mountain. However, if he were to accept the challenge, there was no guarantee that he would be able to emerge unscathed. In fact, it was much more likely that he suffered the same fate as that great demon. With that in mind, the Grand Elder hurriedly replied, "This is an important treasure of our sect that I've brought with me to slay this great demon, and it's not to be displayed for no good reason." At the same time, he was fuming internally. How could there be such an unreasonable swordsman in this world? And why weren't the Confucian sages doing anything to keep him in check? The Grand Elder felt like he had already done enough to concede his inferiority, yet right as he was hoping that the swordsman would let him off the hook, the man asked, "If you don't bring out that treasure, how are you going to withstand my second attack?" The Grand Elder of Parasol Leaf Sect was furious to hear this, and he could barely contain his temper. Meanwhile, Jiang Shangzhen was looking on with a serious expression, but internally, he was chortling with glee. He had always found the cultivators of Parasol Leaf Sect to be completely insufferable, and that was an opinion shared by everyone in the entire Jade Tablet Sect, particularly the sect leader. The Jade Tablet Sect leader had only gotten truly angry a handful of times in his life, and almost all of those temper tantrums had been caused by Parasol Leaf Sect cultivators. Right now, Parasol Leaf Continent is in a state of great turmoil, so I implore you to lay down your sword, Senior, Song Mao said in a serious voice. "Will you take my second attack in his stead then?" the swordsman asked. "I will," Song Mao replied without any hesitation. "Regardless of whether I can withstand the attack, there are people from both Parasol Leaf Sect and Jade Tablet Sect present to bear witness and report the outcome to Peace and Tranquility Mountain. Even if I die here, I will only have my own weakness to blame, and Peace and Tranquility Mountain certainly won't seek retribution against you." A reminiscent look appeared on the swordsman's face at the mention of Peace and Tranquility Mountain, and he suddenly burst into laughter as he said, "As expected of a cultivator from Peace and Tranquility Mountain, you have some backbone." Peace and Tranquility Mountain is the only passable sect on the entire Parasol Leaf continent. I can't even remember the others. Song Mao didn't know what to make of this response. The swordsman suppressed his sword chi somewhat, indicating that he wasn't going to be unleashing any further attacks. He had decided to let Song Mao off the hook, as he recalled hearing little Chi mention that the cultivators of Peace and Tranquility Mountain all had a traditional heroic spirit about them. With that in mind, the swordsman said, "You can take the great demon's body." Song Mao was very relieved to hear this, and he sheathed his sword before cupping his fist in a salute. After a brief hesitation, the swordsman turned to the three men and asked, "Do any of you know of a young man by the name of Chan Pingan?" Song Mao and the Grand Elder of Parasol Leaf Sect both exchanged blank looks with one another, while Jiang Shangzhen quickly weighed up his options for a moment before replying with a smile. "I do." "What's he been up to?" the swordsman asked. Jiang Shangzhen gave the swordsman a concise recount of everything that he had seen in the Lotus Flower-blessed land through voice transmission. The swordsman nodded in response, then remarked in an unimpressed manner, "I suppose climbing to the top of a blessed land is a decent achievement. Do you need me to look out for him, senior?" Jiang Shangzhen asked. "Don't bother, you barely even possess the power to look after yourself," the swordsman scoffed. Jiang Shangzhen fell silent as a wry smile appeared on his face, and the swordsman promptly departed, traveling further and further away from Parasol Leaf Continent. He had no intention of serving as a Dao guardian for anyone. Once the swordsman was far out of earshot, a cheeky grin appeared on Jiang Shangzhen's face as he remarked, "As expected, things are much more exciting in our majestic world. Do you know who that senior was?" Song Mao asked with a curious expression. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and offered no response. The Grand Elder of Parasol Leaf Sect cautiously made his way back to the two men, then harumphed coldly. "His swordsmanship may be exceptional, but he's nothing more than..." "Nothing more than what?" Jiang Shangzhen goaded with a provocative smile. The old man was forced to swallow the words that were about to come out of his mouth next. He was truly terrified of the unreasonable swordsman. He was extremely thankful for his decision to hold his tongue, as in the next instant, the swordsman suddenly returned without any warning. He took a glance at the old man, then said to Jiang Shangzhen, "You can have this thing's demon core." Jiang Shangzhen immediately cupped his fist in a salute and replied, "Thank you, senior." With that, Zuiyu departed once again. Inside that underground palace on Parasol Leaf Continent, Bai Yuan was greeted by the sight of a tall old man in a Taoist robe. An awkward smile appeared on the young Taoist priest's face. "You got what you wished for. Are you happy now?" the old Taoist priest asked. "I'm certainly very surprised, that's for sure," the young Taoist priest replied with a wry smile. Even though they had never met before, Bai Yuan could immediately tell who the old Taoist priest was. It was the enigmatic observing Tao Temple abbot that no one could find, the old Taoist priest of the East Sea. If anyone wanted to enter the Lotus Flower-blessed land, they had no choice but to negotiate with that child with the golden gourd on his back. Even Almighty Earth immortals had no option but to barter with the child. The young Taoist priest rose to his feet as he asked, "Have you come to kill me to uphold the heavenly Tao?" "Uphold the heavenly Tao? The heavenly Tao is already in ruins, what is there to uphold?" the old Taoist priest sneered. "I only came here because I wanted to see who it was that had the courage to go after the parasol leaf umbrella that I gave out." A look of realization appeared on the young Taoist priest's face as he asked, "Are you referring to the oil paper umbrella carried by that little girl? If I had known that Chun Ping'an had ties to you, I would have never gone after him." The old Taoist priest strode past the young Taoist priest and made his way up the steps onto the dragon-locking platform as he said, "I have no interest in the affairs of the world, and I'm not going to kill you. It's about time that certain complacent little rascals were taught a lesson. Otherwise, they're going to forget what those old geezers did for them all those years ago." The young Taoist priest also made his way onto the stone platform behind the old Taoist priest, and he smiled as he said, "Thank you, senior." With this declaration from the old Taoist priest, his plans in Parasol Leaf Sect had already come halfway into fruition, even though they had been prematurely exposed. At the very least, once he returned to Savage World, he wouldn't be banished into that mountain range and be forced to carry mountains for that blind man year after year. From an outsider's perspective, perhaps this seemed like a rather fun task, but all of the great demons that were actually subjected to this terrible fate suffered immensely. Most importantly, for some reason, the rulers of Savage World seemed to have never considered combining their powers to pull out this thorn in their side and toss it over to the Sword Chi Great Wall. Upon stepping onto the dragon-locking platform, the old Taoist priest took a glance at the apprehensive Bai Yuan, then nodded as he remarked, "You're an interesting little fellow. I suppose I'll send you on your way. Remember to use your white ape sword-carrying technique in the Lotus Flower-blessed land." In the blink of an eye, Bai Yuan vanished from the dragon-locking platform. The young Taoist priest's mind was racing as he said, "Now that Bai Yuan is gone, please be direct with me and tell me what you would like me to do, senior." "What do you want to do?" the old Taoist priest asked. "If I say it, I'll die here on this dragon-locking platform, so I won't," the young Taoist priest replied in a candid fashion. A disappointed look appeared on the old Taoist priest's face as he said, "I already gave you a chance. At your peak, you were a great demon only a hair's breadth away from the 13th tier. Yet you didn't even dare to kill Chan Ping'an. In your failure to do so, you missed out on an enormous fated opportunity." Back on the Sword Chi Great Wall, Chen Qingdu lent Chan Ping'an a sword with the intention of passing on some karma to Chan Ping'an. "If you had killed him, you and Savage World would have both done a great deed, and I would have been able to take advantage of the opportunity to usher Chan Ping'an into my temple. Not only would that infuriate that old scholar to no end, it would also significantly elevate the height of my position." The young Taoist priest was stunned to hear this, while the old Taoist priest concluded, "But it's all too late now." The young Taoist priest stomped a foot down onto the ground in remorse and frustration, and the dragon-locking platform trembled beneath his feet, while lightning flashed in the space outside. "If you were a human, then you would have a bright future ahead in Majestic World as a diplomatist, but you don't possess the aptitude required to become a naturalist," the old Taoist priest remarked. "That is indeed true," the young Taoist priest replied with a resigned nod. "Truth be told, if any of the people of your generation from your two worlds had been born just a little earlier, many of you would have had bright futures ahead had you managed to live to this day," the old Taoist priest said in a meaningful voice, and the young Taoist priest fell into deep thought upon hearing this. The old Taoist priest reached out with one hand to make a grabbing motion, and all of the lightning outside the dragon-locking platform instantly broke through the constraints of the rules, springing onto the platform before converging in the old Taoist priest's grasp to form a fist-sized ball of lightning. A wry smile appeared on the young Taoist priest's face upon seeing this. Just that simple gesture alone perfectly displayed the gap between them, and it had nothing to do with cultivation base. The old Taoist priest tucked the ball of lightning up his sleeve, then said in a quiet voice, "In one of the 100 schools of thought that the old scholar sorely despises, a figure emerged with the most impactful saying of this world. Please enlighten me, senior," the young Taoist priest implored with a fervent expression. The old Taoist priest turned to him with a cold expression and reprimanded, "You're a demon, yet you refer to me as senior? Are you denouncing me as an old demon?" All that remained on the dragon-locking platform was the hibiscus hat. With a casual sweep of the old Taoist priest's sleeve, the great demon's soul took on a human form that remained identical in appearance to the young Taoist priest, and it slammed heavily onto the ground with an agonized expression. Even so, it still hurriedly drew the hibiscus hat into its grasp before putting the hat on its head again. Even though it had successfully crossed over the Sword Chi Great Wall, it was only able to leave Savage World with one of its immortal souls and 4 of its mortal forms before ultimately arriving on Parasol Leaf Continent. However, thanks to the exceptional body that it had chosen, it was still able to reach the 12th tier after cultivating for so long in Majestic World, but even so, it couldn't put up any resistance against the old Taoist priest. A wise man once made an analogy, stating that if half of a stick is shorn away every single day, then that stick will never completely disappear, the old Taoist priest said. The great demon was able to stabilize his soul with the hibiscus hat, and it said in a strained voice, "I've seen that quote on many past occasions in books from various different teachings. It's one of the lesser-known quotes from the founder of the logicians, and I never considered it carefully in the past. That's why you're all fools," the old Taoist sneered. The great demon didn't dare to protest, and it was feeling more homesick than ever. The old Taoist priest turned to it with a faint smile as he said, "I've already erased the restriction on halting snow, Is that going to be a problem? The great demon shook its head in response. You're not even going to try and flatter me? You deserve to suffer through this ordeal for being so obtuse. The old Taoist priest scoffed. The great demon was left feeling rather perplexed, but the old Taoist priest had already departed without offering any further elaboration. As Chun Ping'an unfurled Sui Yubian's bonded scroll and tossed a gold essence copper coin inside, light rain began to fall in the capital city of Southern Garden Nation. It was early winter, so even though the rain wasn't very heavy, it was still a little annoying. A group of 4 people were walking on a street, and they were led by a young individual with a set of rather neutral features, making it difficult to tell their gender. Even though it was winter, they were holding a folding fan, but the fan was closed, and they were tapping it against the palm of their hand. If it weren't for their exceptional good looks, they would have surely been seen as a pretentious vulgarian carrying around a folding fan to give themselves a more scholarly and refined appearance. As the 4 of them walked along, the young individual was looking around with an amazed expression. There was a child by the name of Jian Lai. He had already stepped out onto the street from the crude alley of his house, but with the rain suddenly falling without any warning, he had no choice but to run back home to fetch an oil paper umbrella. At this point, he had only just rounded the corner onto the street, and he spotted the 4 people from afar. He immediately began to scrutinize them intently with a hopeful expression, only to be disappointed upon catching sight of the young man and realizing that it wasn't the person that he was hoping to see. Feeling a little dejected, the boy hurriedly made his way toward the school. Teacher Zhong had very little tolerance for tardy students. Jian Lai hadn't caught a very clear glimpse of the young man, but the latter had seen him very clearly. As one of the rare otherworldly immortals to have retained his true body and the entirety of his soul in the lotus flower-blessed land, Lu Tai had claimed a spot in the new upper 10 elites from the instant that he set foot in this blessed land. As for the 3 servants accompanying him, they had been granted the same blessings, but their foundations that they had established back in Majestic World weren't sufficiently solid, and they were also quite young, so they were only considered to be second-rate masters in this world, still some way away from being able to join the ranks of the first-rate ones. The trio consisted of Huan Yin, Huang Shang, and Tao Xieyang, all 3 of whom were currently Lu Tai's unofficial disciples. Lu Tai made his way onto a street neighboring Champion Scholar Ale and the martial arts school nearby. He cast his gaze toward the small house that was where Ding Ying and Yuer had previously stayed upon their arrival in the capital city, and it was technically a stronghold for the demonic orthodoxy in Southern Garden Nation. In the wake of the battle, Imperial Preceptor Zhongqiu had retained ownership of the house, and Lu Tai smiled as he mused, "From now on, this is my private residence." He then turned to his 3 disciples as he instructed, "Huang Shang, you go to the Lake Mountain faction. Once there, how much you manage to learn from Eugenie will be up to you. As for Tao Xieyang and Huan Yin, you 2 can explore this blessed land as you please. Tao Xieyang, you can keep an eye on the Dragon General Tang Tie. Huan Yin, I suggest you approach the armed sage Cheng Yuanshan. If you still haven't entered the ranks of the upper 10 elite in 60 years, then resign yourselves to staying here for the rest of your lives. I've already given each of you some life-saving treasures. If you're still going to drown in this tiny lake, then there was no point for me to invest in any of you to begin with." With that, Lu Tai gave the trio a dismissive wave, and the 3 of them promptly departed. Standing not far away was an elderly scholar, none other than the teacher Zhong that Jian Lai had been thinking of. However, in a reversal of roles, he was going to be the one late to school, as opposed to his naughty and tardy students. Lu Tai cast his gaze toward Zhongqiu as he smiled and said, "Chun Ping'an and I are friends. I've personally witnessed your power and flair, and that's why I've decided to take up residence in Southern Garden Nation." Zhongqiu nodded in response. "In that case, I look forward to seeing what you're going to do, but I hope you won't be too reckless, even if you are Chun Ping'an's friend." Lu Tai snapped open his folding fan, then began gently fanning himself with it as he smiled and asked, "Have you thought about going to see the outside world in 60 years? Zhongqiu shook his head and departed. Lu Tai was completely unbothered by Zhongqiu's frosty reception, and he turned to the gate of the residence to find that the door god plastered to it was already looking a little worn out after a year of being exposed to the elements. The end of the year is coming up, so I'll have to change the door god and put up some couplets. I'll also have to acquire a few pretty girls to serve as my maidservants as well. Should I go to Spring Tide Palace to request a few from Zhou Shi? As Chen Ping'an tossed a second gold essence copper coin into the picture scroll, rain began to fall over the Lake Mountain faction in Pinesong Nation. Even though it was a bright and sunny day, no one was particularly alarmed by this, with the exception of Yu Zheni, who rose up into the air atop his flying sword. His robes were flapping audibly as he hovered high up in the sky and murmured to himself, "A storm is coming." Over in an official's manor in the capital city of Southern Garden Nation, a young boy had only just emerged from the scripture library when something fell out of the sky and landed on the ground right in front of him. It had almost fallen on his head, and it gave him a huge fright. Upon close inspection, it was an emaciated little white ape with blood all over its fur. The little ape was laying on the ground in a feeble manner, looking even more dazed and confused than the young boy. On the border of northern Jian Nation, a young Taoist priest was standing on the bank of a lake, staring at his own reflection in the water in a transfixed fashion as he murmured to himself over and over again, "Who am I? Who am I?" All of a sudden, he fell to his knees and threw his hands onto his head in agony. Inside the rundown temple, the atmosphere was a little strange. Everyone was seated around a campfire, and Chen Ping'an said, "Thanks for your hard work." Zhu Lian turned down the vial of medicine offered to him by Chen Ping'an, telling him that it wasn't worth wasting his precious medicine on such minor injuries. He then took a glance at Sui Yubian, and a smile appeared on his face as he said, "Young master, I was told something a while ago, but I've never been able to quite figure out what it means. Would you be able to enlighten me?" "Go ahead," Chen Ping'an prompted with a nod. Zhu Lian's entire body was covered in blood, and there were many parts of his body where the bare bone was exposed, but he appeared completely unbothered as he said, "With 1 coin taken 11 falls to 10, spelling the end." Sui Yubian immediately sprang to her feet, and fierce killing intent erupted out of her body, but she discovered that Chen Ping'an was yet to return deep infatuation to her. She glowered intently at Zhu Lian as she demanded, "Why didn't you say that earlier?" Chen Ping'an paid no heed to her reaction as he explained, "That most likely means that if I use a gold essence copper coin to revive one of you from your picture scroll, then your upper limit will fall from the 11th tier, or the legendary martial god tier, to the 10th tier. If you're revived twice, then you'll only be able to reach the 9th tier, or the mountain summit tier." A heartbroken look appeared on Sui Yubian's face, while her killing intent became even more pronounced. She resented both Zhu Lian and Chen Ping'an, and she was unable to suppress those feelings. "I see. Thank you for enlightening me, young master," Zhu Lian said with a smile. All of a sudden, Chen Ping'an rose to his feet, then began to make his way out of the temple as he said, "Come with me, Sui Yubian. I need to speak to you about something." Sui Yubian remained standing inside the temple with a cold look in her eyes. Chen Ping'an continued to make his way out of the temple as he declared, "I'll give you 15 minutes. If you don't come out to see me by then, I'll burn your picture scroll, and you won't have to return the 2 gold essence copper coins that you owe me." Only then did Sui Yubian step out of the temple in an expressionless manner before quickly catching up with Chen Ping'an. After Sui Yubian caught up to him, Chen Ping'an seemed to be completely unconcerned about the possibility that she would kill him in a fit of rage, and he said, "If you allow your mental state to collapse, then what's the point in continuing to practice swordsmanship? If this is the extent of your mental fortitude, then you should just give up on your sword training altogether. Even without the restrictions placed on you by that old Taoist priest, you won't be able to reach your full potential anyway." Sui Yubian's right hand began to twitch. Chen Ping'an continued to walk along ahead of her as he said in an indifferent voice, "You're going to die. If you really want to die, then there are some things that I have to tell you before you die." Sui Yubian remained silent. 15 minutes later, Chen Ping'an and Sui Yubian returned to the temple together. Even though Sui Yubian was clearly still in a terrible mood, her mental state seemed to have improved, and her killing intent had completely faded, as had her previously smoldering fury. The two of them sat down beside the campfire again. Chen Ping'an accepted the bowl offered to him by Pei Qian, and began eating his second bowl of rice for the night. Pei Qian crouched down beside him, holding up a small jar of pickled vegetables in a sycophantic manner. Chen Ping'an looked around the fire, then smiled as he asked, Do any of you have any thoughts about this new world that you're in? The four of them were silent for a moment, following which Lu Baixiang smiled as he said, All I wish for is to retire to the mountains, sip tea brewed from spring water, and live out a life of leisure. I want to capture the heart of a beautiful maiden. Zhu Lian chuckled. Wei Xian was silent for a moment, then declared an aspiration fitting of his status as a founding emperor. I want to slay 1,000,000 enemies and have my sword forever drenched in blood. That's so unrealistic, Pei Qian scoffed. Wei Xian nodded in agreement. Truth be told, that was an aspiration set out for me by a poet from Southern Garden Nation. If I were to make a poem myself, it would most likely be something along the lines of, Rain, rain, go away, come again another day. Pei Qian was much more pleased to hear this, and she nodded as she praised, That's much better. Even I can understand that. Wei Xian smiled as he replied, Many esteemed scholars have told me in earnest that I do indeed have a natural gift for poetry and scholastics. Pei Qian rolled her eyes in response. I wish to live among the immortals and my beloved in the heavens. Sui Yubian mused in an absent-minded manner. Chun Ping'an turned to Pei Qian with a smile and said, It's your turn now. I don't have any aspirations, Pei Qian mumbled in a slightly embarrassed manner. Chun Ping'an wolfed down a large mouthful of rice along with some pickled vegetables, then smiled as he said, Surely you have some aspirations or something that you want. Pei Qian's eyes immediately lit up as she said, All right, I'll say it then, but you're not allowed to get mad or make fun of me. Chun Ping'an nodded in response. I want to read the thinnest book, eat the most expensive dish, yell profanities at the worst person, and hit the wildest dog, Pei Qian loudly declared. Chun Ping'an almost choked on his rice. A sense of foreboding welled up in Pei Qian's heart, and she figured that Chun Ping'an was most likely disappointed because her aspirations weren't sufficiently ambitious, so she hurriedly looked down at the hiking pole beside her feet as she added, And I also want to prod the largest hornet's nest. Such lofty aspirations for someone so young. Wei Xian praised with a serious expression. Pei Qian immediately turned to Wei Xian with a wide smile as she said, You're the best, old man Wei. No wonder you were able to become an emperor. It's too bad that you're so poor now. Chun Ping'an shook his head in a resigned manner, following which a smile also crept onto his face. Outside the temple, the rain finally stopped. The campfire was providing some warmth in the rundown temple in the wake of the storm. The little lotus spirit was sitting on Chun Ping'an's leg, and it subtly pointed at Pei Qian's eye. Chun Ping'an immediately understood its intentions, and he instructed Pei Qian to leave the temple with him, while the little lotus spirit vanished into the earth to help Chun Ping'an patrol the area around the temple. Chun Ping'an hadn't seen what had happened to Pei Qian in the temple earlier, but after the battle, he had noticed the blood on her sleeves and the mud all over her body. She had told him that her eyes had suddenly started hurting out of the blue, and she had rolled around in pain on the ground for a long time. After that, the little lotus figure had given Chun Ping'an a very animated recount of the events that had transpired. After leading Pei Qian some distance out of the temple, Chun Ping'an stopped in his tracks, then turned around and crouched down to look closely into Pei Qian's eyes. What happened? Why did your eyes suddenly start bleeding? Pei Qian's complexion instantly turned as pale as a sheet as she thought back to the painful ordeal she had suffered, and tears began to well up in her eyes as she shook her head and sobbed. I don't know. They suddenly started to really hurt, like something was about to explode inside. Just like the firecrackers that rich people set off during celebrations. By the way, can we set off some firecrackers to celebrate the new year once we get back home? It looks so festive. I've always wanted to give it a try. Chun Ping'an didn't know how to respond to Pei Qian's erratic train of thought, and he said, Back when we left Dragon Spring Prefecture, someone forbade us from returning there in the next 5 years. However, we can definitely set off some firecrackers on New Year's Eve. Let's get back on track here. Did the old Taoist priest that threw us out of the lotus flower-blessed land do something to your eyes? Did he say anything to you? All of a sudden, Pei Qian yelped as Chun Ping'an grabbed onto her ear and scolded her. Are you stupid? You're going to get killed someday if you keep being so greedy. Pei Qian immediately began to complain that her eyes were hurting, and only then did Chun Ping'an let go of her ear. At the same time, he recalled that Zhong Kuei had remarked that Pei Qian had very pretty eyes. He must have already seen something back then but refrained from pointing it out. Chen Ping'an then recalled something Zhong Kuei said. The sun rises from the East Sea, scattering molten gold over thousands of miles. The moon sets behind the West Mountain, when the apes start to call. Surely he didn't actually put the sun and moon of the lotus flower-blessed land into her eyes, Chen Ping'an mused to himself. At the very least, she was able to see the little lotus spirit even when it was underground, and she was also able to see through the concealment ability of the old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. Following the incident where that young Taoist priest had given him that ancestral Hall Jade tablet, Chen Ping'an had become rather apprehensive. However, when it came to that old Taoist priest from the Observing Tao Temple, if he truly wanted to plot against Chen Ping'an, it was clear to Chen Ping'an that he would be powerless to resist, so he could only go with the flow and deal with whatever circumstances were thrown at him as they arose. In Chen Ping'an's eyes, he didn't think that the ancestral Hall Jade tablet had been bestowed upon him as part of some underhanded scheme hatched by the old Taoist priest. This wasn't because he admired or respected the old Taoist priest. Rather, it was because he knew that for cultivators of his caliber, such as Branchmaster Lu Chan, they no longer resorted to sly and underhanded schemes. Instead, all of their plots and machinations were clearly laid out, and they aimed to comply with the Great Tao in everything that they did. Chen Ping'an rose to his feet, then said, "I'll buy you a new oil paper umbrella later." "Why waste money on that?" Pei Qian asked with a surprised expression. Chen Ping'an offered no response, merely instructing her to return to the rundown temple. After Pei Qian had returned to the temple, Chen Ping'an turned to discover an old man who he was immediately able to identify as Duke Gao Shizhen due to his striking resemblance to Gao Shuyi. Standing behind Gao Shizhen was an old man holding an umbrella. He appeared to be a steward, and was most likely a qi refiner. There was also a white-robed old man holding a wooden cane, and he was looking at Chen Ping'an with a fawning smile on his face. Gao Shizhen was staring intently at Chen Ping'an when he suddenly mused, "You're even younger than I imagined. If only the third prince hadn't tried to eliminate the Yao clan and that clan on the border. It was his desire for further accolades that led to that disaster. If you and my son, Gao Shuyi, had met in Mirage City instead, perhaps on a rainy night just one, if you had met as a pair of strangers and just so happened to share a drink together in a restaurant, would the two of you have become friends?" Chen Ping'an shook his head in response. Gao Shizhen's face began to contort with rage. "I already said this to Lu Tsong earlier. All of us understand the principles and know what we should do, but no matter how wise and sagely those principles are, the temptation of getting something that we want can be too difficult to resist. I hope that Gao Shuyi doesn't encounter me again in his next life. Otherwise, I'll be sure to kill him again," Chen Ping'an declared. Gao Shizhen's expression darkened even further and he asked, "Are you trying to goad me into attacking you so that you'll have a reason to retaliate and erase my entire clan from the Great Quan Empire?" Chen Ping'an raised a hand and waved it dismissively as he replied, "This is the problem with you and Gao Shuyi. Everything you do and say is so predictable." This casual gesture from Chen Ping'an harbored no ill will, but the old steward's heart instantly leaped up into his throat upon hearing this, and he almost threw himself in front of Gao Shizhen, while the old man holding the wooden cane was on the verge of fleeing into the earth. This was an unfathomably powerful immortal, who had just slain the great water demon of Burial River, and forced a noble scholar into retreat with a single slash of his sword. How was a mere mountain lord like him supposed to stand any chance here? In the eyes of the white-robed mountain lord, just a single sneeze from Chen Ping'an would be enough to wipe him out of existence. Gao Shizhen turned out to be the most calm and collected of the three, and he said, "I've come here to transport the bodies of the deceased soldiers down the mountain. You're not going to stop me, are you?" "That's the only reason I'm even willing to stand here and talk to you," Chen Ping'an replied. Gao Shizhen was becoming more and more furious by the second. The Gao clan had been in power ever since the founding of the Great Quan Empire, and never had it been humiliated. "Master," the steward called out in a quiet voice, urging him to rein in his temper. Gao Shizhen took a deep breath to compose himself, then turned to the mountain lord as he snapped, "What do you have to say? Hurry up." The mountain lord mustered up some courage before taking a step forward, then extended a deep bow as he smiled and said, "Esteemed Immortal Chen, I will be assisting Duke Gao with transporting the bodies away, and I'll have to employ the services of some mountain spirits to do so. They're not exactly the brightest creatures, so I'm worried that they may cause a commotion that would disturb you. Hence, I came to give you some forewarning, and I hope that you can tolerate the disturbance in your infinite majesty and generosity. It's fine, just do what you need to do, Qian Pingyan replied with a nod. Also, may I ask what you plan to do with the body of that great demon, esteemed immortal Qian? The mountain lord asked in a timid manner. Would you like me to instruct the mountain spirits to perform some menial tasks for you, such as dismembering the body and draining its blood out into containers? At this point, Qian Pingyan had only taken the demon core of the river demon, and he smiled as he said, That would be great, thank you. I'll reward you and the mountain spirits for your efforts once you're done. The mountain lord was extremely touched, and he was almost moved to the point of tears. How could there be such a powerful immortal under the heavens who's also so approachable and generous? Gao Shizhen gave a cold harumph before turning to depart, while Qian Pingyan made his way back to the rundown temple. The burial river great demon had only been one step away from manifesting a golden core, and its demon core was a translucent green color and around the size of a date pit. Perhaps it was because the great demon had been struck by one of the 5 lightning righteous technique talismans from Mount Longhu, but there were traces of lightning flashing within the demon core. Despite how precious a great demon's body was, Qian Pingyan had definitely made a loss from this battle. In exchange for this false golden core, he had to sacrifice 3 dragon claw seal script talismans, the cavalry circling city talismans personally inscribed by Zhong Kuei, and a golden 5 dragons holding jewels talisman. Even now, Qian Pingyan still couldn't help but lament his losses. As he made his way back to the rundown temple, he was praying that he wouldn't encounter any further crises that would force him to expend even more resources. As for the 2 gold essence copper coins that had been used to resurrect Sui Yubian, Qian Pingyan didn't even dare to think about them. As Qian Pingyan entered the temple, Wei Xian asked, Should we go back to Mirage City and stage a counterattack? Right now, the Lu clan must be terrified, so they wouldn't dare to put up any resistance, and we could extort that noble scholar for everything he's worth in exchange for keeping his dirty deeds a secret. Qian Pingyan considered this proposal for a moment, then shook his head as he said, We have to set off for the immortal ferry station on the Heavenly Palace Peak right away. Once there, I'll send flying sword messages to both Great Subduing Academy and Peace and Tranquility Mountain to inform them of what happened tonight, and the rest will be up to them. Zhong Kuei and the Academy must be made aware of Wang Qi's actions. Right now, even Peace and Tranquility Mountain is in a state of turmoil, as is the entirety of Parasol Leaf Continent, so it's best for us to return to Old Dragon City as soon as possible. Lu Baixiang and Sui Yubian were responsible for night watch duties. Zhu Lian was the one who had suffered the most severe injuries, and he went to wash up in a nearby creek, then changed into a set of clean clothes. After that, he sat down with his legs crossed by the campfire and fell asleep, much to Pei Qian's admiration. Wei Xian had taken off his suit of dew armor, and even though he wasn't on night watch duty, he still made his way out of the temple, then crouched down and stared absent-mindedly at all of the chaotic footprints on the ground left behind in the wake of the battle. As for Qian Pingyan, he sat down with his back leaning against the wall, and it looked as if he had fallen asleep. Despite her best efforts, sleep continued to elude Pei Qian, and she knew that Qian Pingyan was in a foul mood, but she didn't know exactly why. Was it because he had been forced to part with so many precious talismans during the battle against the great demon? With that in mind, she really wanted to pick up her hiking pole to beat up the little lotus spirit. Before long, a sense of drowsiness began to set in, and she fell asleep in her little tent. Early the next morning, Wei Xian was seated on the doorstep of the temple, and standing outside the temple was the white-robed mountain lord. Standing further away behind him were some mountain spirits carrying 2 large bags, as well as an array of different containers. The mountain lord had arrived outside the temple even before the break of dawn, and he remained completely silent with his group of lackeys. On top of that, he had been smiling at the temple without even a moment of rest for the past 2 hours, and even Wei Xian couldn't help but be a little impressed. After waking up from his slumber, Qian Pingyan stepped out of the temple, and upon spotting the mountain lord, he hurriedly approached him and offered him a lesser heat coin for his efforts. The mountain lord was absolutely terrified, thinking that this was some type of trap, and he desperately refused the lesser heat coin for fear of losing his life. Hence, Chan Ping'an could only tuck the lesser heat coin away again before cupping his fist in a grateful salute toward the mountain lord. The smile immediately returned to the mountain lord's face, and he promptly departed. Only after traveling for a few kilometers did he dare to wipe the sweat from his own forehead. A mountain spirit with a human body, but the head of a rat, immediately said in a sycophantic fashion. To think that even such a powerful immortal treats our esteemed mountain lord with so much respect. If word of this were to spread, no one in this entire mountain range would dare to oppose you ever again. The mountain lord was clearly very pleased with the mountain spirit's flattery, and he put on a justified expression as he replied, "That esteemed immortal must have appreciated the stellar quality of my character." Chan Ping'an looked at all of the bags and containers piled up at the entrance of the temple, and he thought to himself that he could finally put to good use the minimization treasure gifted to him by Zhang Dafeng back in Old Dragon City. He had become very accustomed to using 15th as a pocket treasure, but the size of its internal space was a little lackluster. The unengraved jade tablet was a minimization treasure highly sought after even among Earth immortals, but Chan Ping'an had refrained from using it this entire time, and that was a massive waste. Pocket treasures and minimization treasures were referred to by cultivators as the smallest of small worlds, and were extremely rare and precious. Cui Dongshan had once reached the lofty pinnacle of the 12th tier. Yet even he only had a single minimization treasure. A normal pocket treasure or minimization treasure would each have a key that could allow one to open the treasure. Without the key, such a treasure was next to impossible to access except by brute force. Of course, if someone resorted to such means, then at the very least, most of the items stored in the treasure would be destroyed, and there was even a chance that the treasure's internal space would be entirely destroyed. The minimization treasure given to Chan Ping'an by Zhang Dafeng had naturally come with a key, and Zhang Dafeng had also taught him the refinement method for the minimization treasure. The journey to the Heavenly Palace Peak proved to be smooth and uneventful. Chan Ping'an had already severely damaged the foundation of the Great Quan Empire, so it was no longer able or willing to intercept Chan Ping'an's group. Along the northbound journey, Chan Ping'an carried his bamboo case on his back, while Pei Qian was holding her hiking pole with her bag slung across her chest, and the same old treasure pagoda demon-suppressing talisman was plastered to her forehead. Lu Baixiang had halting snow strapped to his waist, and several ghost stones in his hand were clacking together audibly. Sui Yubian had deep infatuation on her back, and she often seemed lost in thought as she walked long. Compared with the pure and indifferent sword immortal who had first emerged from the picture scroll, there was now more human emotion about her. Julien liked to read as he walked, and Pei Qian couldn't help but wonder how he still hadn't fallen to his death. Wei Xian was feeling rather bored, and he had begun emulating Chan Ping'an's six-step walking meditation as he walked, something that Chan Ping'an noticed but made no remarks on. The Heavenly Palace Peak was the tallest peak of Clear Realm Mountain in the northern region of the Great Quan Empire. Clear Realm Mountain had many peaks that stretched over a long distance, and it was teeming with lush greenery, making it one of the most spectacular pieces of scenery to behold in the entire Great Quan Empire. The Heavenly Palace Peak had a cinnabar staircase of 3,000 steps leading from the foot of the mountain to its summit, and on the summit was an azure tiger palace. All those who cultivated on the mountain were isolated from the outside world, never interfering with mortal affairs, and any wealthy or influential figures who attempted to scale the mountain to visit these cultivators were sternly turned away. On top of that, there were many wild beasts on Clear Realm Mountain, and there was no path that led straight to the Heavenly Palace Peak, so the Azure Tiger Palace had always been shrouded in mystery. Even hunters and lumberjacks didn't dare to get close to the Heavenly Palace Peak, and the elderly people in the area claimed that the immortals on the mountain didn't want to be in close proximity to mortal energy, so any mortal visitors were blighted with the phenomenon of the ghost hitting the wall. Officially, the Flora Convent was the #1 cultivation sect of the Great Quan Empire, but no cultivation site that had an intercontinental ferry station was to be looked down on. Of course, the Heavenly Palace Peak couldn't compare with the likes of Stalactite Mountain and Old Dragon City, but it was still far superior to the Flora Convent. Chan Ping'an explained this logic to Wei Xian and the others, and all four of them were extremely intelligent individuals, so they were able to immediately grasp what they were told. Specific mention of the Heavenly Palace Peak's immortal maiden dresser had been made in the book that Chan Ping'an had purchased from Stalactite Mountain, and it was only a very brief mention, but it still filled him with intrigue and wonder. At this point, Pei Qian was exhausted from walking, and she suddenly raised her head as she exclaimed, "Look! Look! There's a boat in the sky." Qian Ping'an pressed down her raised finger as he asked, "Have you forgotten about the mountain god marriage ceremony?" Pei Qian hurriedly nodded in response as she vowed, "I won't do it again." A bright smile appeared on Pei Qian's face as she countered, "I'm not young anymore, I'll be 11 next year." "Then how about you carry my bamboo case for me?" Qian Ping'an asked with a smile. A pitiable look appeared on Pei Qian's face as she protested, "But I'm only 10 this year." Qian Ping'an took a swipe at her head, but she evaded the blow in an agile fashion before bursting into laughter. All the while, Julien was watching the two of them with a smile on his face. The heavenly palace peak towered over all of the nearby peaks, so it was very eye-catching. However, its summit was shrouded in cloud and mist, making it impossible to see what was up there. Upon entering the territory of the heavenly palace peak, the group encountered a stone arch bridge, flowing beneath which was a clear creek teeming with fish. Qian Ping'an stopped in his tracks as soon as he stepped onto the bridge, then cast his gaze southward. Once he scaled the mountain, he didn't know when he would return to Parasol Leaf Continent next. Would the planchette writing sex sky calling street cease to exist in the wake of that great demon spree of destruction? Would that young external disciple who had inadvertently stumbled upon that 12th tier senior rise to heights that he had previously never even dared to dream of? Was Lu Tai's Dao observation on the Flying Eagle Fortress's ascending sun platform paying off? And why had Lu Tai secretly placed halting snow into his bag back then? At the time, Lu Tai had taken Tao Sheong's trio as unofficial disciples of his, and Qian Ping'an didn't quite understand his quote of, "One can't understand good if one doesn't interact with evil." Only now was he beginning to understand the meaning of those words. Will Zhongkue still be a noble scholar of great subduing academy? Is Huang Ting going to be blessed with more fortune for hunting down that sword-bearing white ape? What's going to become of Zhou Fei now that he's returned to the Jade Tablet sect and become the owner of the Cloud Cave blessed land? Are Green Roving Residence and the Burial River God Temple doing better now? Did Mirage City have its first bout of snow yet? Is Chao Qinglang doing alright living in that small house on his own? Are the teachers at his school wise? Are they able to teach him things that can't be found in books? With Qian Ping'an stopping in his tracks, Lu Baixiang and the others also drew to a halt. Pei Qian was looking into the distance, and in this instant, she felt like there was something a little different about Qian Ping'an. Once again, Julien began reading his book, and after taking a glance at Qian Ping'an, Pei Qian got up onto the tips of her toes to try and see what exactly Julien was reading all day. Julien pressed a hand against her head and gently pushed her away. "What are you reading?" Pei Qian asked. "Nothing, just some cliched stories," Julien replied. "What's a cliched story?" Pei Qian asked, determined to get to the bottom of things. Julien smiled as he replied, "I suppose these stories aren't cliched to you. For a little girl your age, everything is new and exciting. However, the stories in books are ultimately just words on a page, and they don't carry much weight. Once you've read them, you'll quickly forget them. In contrast, we have to live in the real world, and if we're starving or we get blisters on the bottom of our feet from walking, or we take a punch to the face, those things will have an actual impact on us." "What are you trying to say?" Pei Qian asked with furrowed brows. "Can't you learn to speak properly like Old Man Wei?" Julien took a glance at Pei Qian out of the corner of his eye as he chuckled. "You seem to have suddenly become very brave." Pei Qian smiled as she took a couple of steps backward and said, "I'm not brave at all, I'm just a frail and cowardly little girl." Julien closed his book as he complained, "I was reading an intense and riveting body-on-body battle just now, but after all this bickering, I've lost interest in reading." "A riveting battle?" Pei Qian asked in an innocent manner. "Who's fighting? Are they as strong as my father and my beautiful big sister here?" Sui Yubian was becoming more and more disgruntled by the second, and she had to force back the urge to lop off the heads of the old pervert and the annoying little girl. Julien tucked away the romance novel that he was reading, then clasped his hands behind his back as he shook his head and replied, "No, they can't even begin to compare with those two." Pei Qian felt as if she had done an exceptional job at flattery, and she turned to Sui Yubian with an expectant smile on her face, only to find that the beautiful big sister in question had turned and made her way down from the stone arch bridge, so that she wouldn't have to listen to the conversation between Julien and Pei Qian any longer. Pei Qian was quite perplexed to see this, wondering what had gotten Sui Yubian in such a foul mood. As usual, Lu Baixiong was smiling to himself as he observed his surroundings. The scenery here was very much to his liking, and he decided that if he were to settle somewhere to cultivate, he had to find a scenic location just one. Chen Ping'an paid no heed to Pei Qian and Zhu Lian. Once he reached Old Dragon City, he would be able to see Fan Er, Lady Gui, and Zheng Dafeng. Traveling northward from there, he would visit Su Yuanxie's hometown to find him and Zhang Shanfeng. He would tell them that following their separation, he had tasted more kinds of fine wine than he could count on both hands. He was also going to visit Bamboo Scroll Lake to see how Gu Qian was doing. Now that Gu Qian was the disciple of a powerful immortal, Chen Ping'an couldn't help but wonder if he would no longer be a snotty little brat. After that, he would go to Mountain Cliff Academy to see Li Baoping, Li Huai, Lin Shui, Yu Lu, and Xie Xie. Well, also his pupil Cui Dongshan. Visiting all of those places should bring him close to the conclusion of the 5-year term, and he would be able to return to his hometown, to Clay Vase Alley and to Downtrodden Mountain. Even a house made of gold and silver couldn't compare with one's own home, and that wasn't even to mention the fact that he could easily build a house of gold and silver in his hometown if he so pleased. Only after exploring the outside world did he truly come to realize just how exceptional the conditions in the Dragon Spring Prefecture were for cultivation. The fortune of the land and the water had been forcibly restricted to all of the mountains by the Great Li Empire, and it was no exaggeration to say that every single one of those mountains was comparable to Green Roving Residence once it was stamped with the water seal. Green Goat Palace on the Heavenly Palace Peak had a total of 6 branch palaces, all of which were reserved for the worship of different Taoist immortals, and the couplets on the pillars of the main palace were considered to be an unrivaled spectacle in themselves. To the right of Green Goat Palace was a massive stone wall shrouded in cloud and mist, and its left wing was none other than the vastly renowned immortal maiden dresser, which was situated near the cliff. There was an ancient vine growing on the edge of the cliff, and it was extremely lush and prolific, with branches and leaves trailing down the cliff face for over 1,000 feet, resembling the hair of a celestial maiden spilling down from the heavens. Palace leader Lu Yong of Green Goat Palace was an old nascent tier cultivator, whose sole focus was cultivation. He had always maintained a low profile, distancing himself from all mortal affairs so that he could concentrate wholeheartedly on pill refinement. Among qi refiners, he was one of the most extreme examples of a pacifist cultivator, possessing combat prowess far below his nascent tier cultivation base. In the central region of Parasol Leaf Continent, even some of the Golden Core tier Earth Immortals particularly adept at combat looked down on Green Goat Palace. Due to the large scale of the Immortal Fairy Station on the Heavenly Palace Peak, there were often Earth Immortals who came through the area, so the cultivators of Green Goat Palace had been subjected to much humiliation in the past. Just a day prior, someone of an incredibly lofty status had come to visit Green Goat Palace, and after this visitor announced their name, a disciple had hurriedly rushed away to report their arrival. After receiving the news, Lu Yong had come out of his pill refinement chamber even at the risk of ruining the batch of pills that he was working on, and he had personally led the visitor on a tour of Heavenly Palace Peak in a very timid and fearful fashion, sweating profusely the entire time. Lu Yong was so timid and fearful because in the past, Green Goat Palace had offended the sect that the visitor had come from. After all, Green Goat Palace was a little closer with Parasol Leaf Continent. As the leading sect on Parasol Leaf Continent, Parasol Leaf sect's disciples often passed through this fairy station while cultivating outside the sect. On one occasion, a Dragon Gate tier elder of Green Goat Palace had displayed favoritism toward a disciple of Parasol Leaf sect during an altercation. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't have been a problem, but unbeknownst to Green Goat Palace, the young cultivator humiliated by the Dragon Gate tier elder was from Jade Tablet sect, and most importantly, he was a member of the Jiang clan. The Jiang clan of Jade Tablet sect was extremely wealthy. How could it not be, given that it was the owner of the Cloud Cave blessed land? At the time, Jade Tablet sect disciple hadn't kicked up a big fuss or thrown around any threats. Instead, all he did was issue a huge sum of money to reserve all of the spots on the ship setting off from Heavenly Palace Peak's ferry station for an entire month. As a result, hundreds of Parasol Leaf Continent cultivators were stuck on Clear Realm Mountain, delayed for an entire month before they could resume their journeys. Of course, all of them only had Green Goat Palace to blame. Of course that was because no one dared to complain to that Jade Tablet sect disciple. Lu Yong was forced to go into seclusion to refine a huge cauldron of pills. Then, he sent out Green Goat Palace's disciples to give out the pills to all of the disgruntled cultivators as a gesture of apology, and only then was he able to salvage the remnants of Green Goat Palace's hard-earned reputation. This was only just an average member of the Jiang clan. Yet even he had been able to give Green Goat Palace such a hard time. Lu Yong couldn't even imagine what the leader of the Jiang clan could do to Green Goat Palace on a whim. On the summit of the cinnabar staircase on Heavenly Palace Peak stood Zhang Shangzhen and Lu Yong. Is there really no need for me to send the disciples of our Green Goat Palace to help that senior welcome the guests? Lu Yong asked. Zhang Shangzhen had traveled all the way to the Great Quan Empire from the western sea of Parasol Leaf Continent, and he remained silent, offering no response. Lu Yong had no idea what to say or do. His main concern at the moment was that a battle between immortals was about to take place here. Just a single sweep of a sleeve from an immortal of the upper 5 tiers like Zhang Shangzhen would be enough to raise the entire place to the ground. Lu Yong could only pray for protection from his ancestors. Interacting with cultivators of the upper 5 tiers was truly an extremely grueling ordeal. Lu Yong was internally vowing to himself that once Zhang Shangzhen left, he was going to go straight into seclusion to refine a batch of spirit pills to vent his frustration. After an awkward silence, Lu Yong asked in a timid manner, "Should I go and greet our guests in person?" As a nascent tier cultivator, Lu Yong felt like he was already displaying the utmost respect and subservience, so surely Zhang Shangzhen had to respond with some degree of goodwill. To his shock and horror, Zhang Shangzhen replied in an indifferent voice, "You're not worthy." Lu Yong's legs almost gave out from under him. "My Green Goat Palace is doomed." All of a sudden Zhang Shangzhen burst into laughter as he patted Lu Yong on the shoulder and said, "Don't be scared, I was just kidding. As long as everything goes smoothly today, not only will I forgive all of your Green Goat Palace's past transgression, but our Jiang clan will also purchase 100 batches of your most expensive pills." Lu Yong could only force a smile onto his face. Julien's trio had already joined Sui Yubian on the other side of the stone arch bridge, so only Chan Ping'an and Pei Qian were still left standing on the bridge. Chan Ping'an leaned over the railing of the bridge while scouring the water down below, seemingly searching for something. "What are you looking for?" Pei Qian asked. "I want to see if there are any swords suspended under the bridge," Chan Ping'an replied. "You won't be able to see anything from on top of the bridge. I'll go help you look under the bridge," Pei Qian volunteered. "There's no need for that," Chan Ping'an said as he stood up straight again and patted her little head with a smile on his face. Pei Qian raised her head with a perplexed expression, and Chan Ping'an looked down into her eyes. Pei Qian immediately opened her eyes up as wide as they would go before asking, "Take a good look, is there really money in my eyes?" Chan Ping'an faltered slightly upon hearing this, then patted her on the head before pointing at the other end of the bridge as he said, "Let's go. Once we get off this bridge, we can start scaling the mountain." Pei Qian nodded eagerly in response, then adjusted the bag on her shoulder before skipping her way down the stone arch bridge while waving her hiking pole around. Meanwhile, Chan Ping'an closed his eyes and recalled the bridge that he had seen in his dream after dozing off on that bridge back home. It was an extremely long golden bridge situated above a sea of clouds. To his left was the rising sun, while to his right was the setting moon. Chan Ping'an strode over the unremarkable stone arch bridge with his eyes closed, and his robes flapped gently in the passing breeze. Pei Qian had only just skipped her way to the other end of the bridge, and she suddenly turned around with a bright gleam in her eyes as she said to herself, "My father is truly an extraordinary immortal." Chan Ping'an's eyes were closed as he strode over the stone bridge, and his body was swaying slightly while his robes flapped gently around him, giving him the appearance of a profound immortal. Wei Xian was very much in agreement with Pei Qian's statement, and he was just about to offer some praise of his own when he sheepishly closed his mouth. Lu Baixiang smiled as he remarked, "The world is an unpredictable place, so accidents will always happen." As it turned out, there were steps on the stone arch bridge, but for some reason Chan Ping'an had forgotten all about this, and he had trodden onto nothing but empty air, sending him and his bamboo case tumbling to the ground. Pei Qian slapped a hand to forehead in dismay, and all of the fascination and amazement in her eyes were replaced with embarrassment. Sui Yubian turned her head to the side, an amused smile playing on her lips. Chen Ping'an sprang to his feet, then dusted himself off and continued walking forward as if nothing had happened at all. A burst of golden light flashed over his robes, and the spiritual energy in the jewel clasped in the mouth of the golden dragon on the robe became more and more condensed. If it weren't for the protection of this golden Dao robe, this wouldn't have just been a simple matter of taking a fall for Chen Ping'an. His body had been in a state akin to that of a city opening its gates to engage the enemy, and he would have suffered immensely from the spiritual energy gushing into his acupoints. Essentially, the golden Dao robe served as a lake that stored water. However, ultimately this didn't address the problem at its roots. At the moment, Chen Ping'an's top priority was to refine objects of the 5 elements to truly establish a complete bridge of immortality, and create 5 similar lakes in his own acupoints. As for his current bridge of immortality, it was in a profound state somewhere in between illusory and concrete. It existed yet didn't exist at the same time. Only in this instant was Chen Ping'an struck by the inexplicable feeling that he was truly being accepted by this world. The 4 people from the picture scrolls all had extremely sharp eyes, and initially, they had found what they had seen to be rather comical. After all, in their eyes, Chen Ping'an had always maintained a very formal and dignified demeanor, and it was rare to see him make such a fool out of himself. However, the 4 of them then quickly realized that there was more to this than met the eye. None of them commented on their observations. Even though the top of the cinnabar staircase was shrouded in cloud and mist, both Jiang Shangzhen and Lu Yong were formidable cultivators, so they were naturally able to see more than the 4 pure martial artists from the picture scrolls. Lu Yong was looking on with an amazed expression as he exclaimed, "What an incredible Dao robe! Whoever this young immortal is, this Dao robe of his will grant him protection superior to even the premium militarian armor pellets." Lu Yong had falsely presumed that Chen Ping'an was a militarian cultivator. Jiang Shangzhen smiled as he praised his interlocutor. "You possess a sharp eye, Palace Master Lu." "You're far too kind, senior," Lu Yong hurriedly replied. Jiang Shangzhen turned to him and asked, "If I recall correctly, you're even older than I am, so why are you referring to me as senior?" Lu Yong had no response to this. In his eyes, Jiang Shangzhen was an extremely unpredictable man, and his mood could swing at the drop of a hat, often leaving him at a complete loss for what to do or how to respond. Jiang Shangzhen smiled again as he continued, "This is when you should reply with a timely remark like seniority among cultivators is decided by the height of one's achievements, not by age." Lu Yong had no idea what was going on inside Jiang Shangzhen's mind, so he could only reply with a wry smile, "That would indeed be most appropriate, but unfortunately, I possess nowhere near the intellect required to make such a fitting remark. Otherwise, I wouldn't be dedicating my life to refining pills. Over these past 2 centuries, I've been very busy dealing with all of the matters of the Cloud Cave blessed land, so I haven't been able to keep up to date with the affairs of the world. In contrast, I'm sure you're very up to date on worldly affairs, given all of the people that come through the Heavenly Palace Peak's Immortal Ferry Station. Have you heard of any particularly renowned young sword immortals who've come out of majestic world outside of Parasol Leaf Continent in the past century?" Jiang Shangzhen asked. Lu Yong considered the question for a moment, then replied tentatively, "There's one from the Sword Qi Great Wall." "Do you take me for a fool? How could I have not heard of that one?" Jiang Shangzhen chuckled in amusement. Lu Yong shuddered in response before hurriedly attempting to make amends, counting off all of the renowned sword immortals from the other continents. He rattled off a long list of vastly renowned sword immortals of the upper 5 tiers, all of whom were quite young and had established their reputations over the past century. There were 8 in total, 4 of whom were from Middle-earth Divine Continent, 3 from Northern Complete Reed Continent, and 1 from Eastern Treasured Vial Continent, namely Wei Jin, who had only reached the unpolished Jade tier several years ago. Compared with his 7 counterparts, Wei Jin's cultivation base was a little lackluster, but it was clear that he was destined for great things, and that was why he was such a renowned figure even on Parasol Leaf Continent. In fact, for many people like Lu Yong, it was only through Wei Jin that they learned of the existence of Wind Snow Temple. However, as Lu Yong rattled off these swordsmen and listed their most notable feats, Jiang Shangzhen continued to shake his head. None of the listed swordsmen matched the description of the one that he was searching for, and there wasn't much that Lu Yong could do about that. Sword immortals were exceedingly rare to begin with, and they were the only ones under the heavens capable of completely disregarding the hurdle of the nascent tier to slay unpolished jade tier cultivators. Lu Yong had been focused wholeheartedly on pill refinement over the past century, and those 8 sword immortals were the only ones that he was able to list. Zhang Shangzhen didn't try to press Lu Yong any further, and at the same time, he was also feeling a little forlorn. He had spent the past 60 years in the Lotus Flower Blessed Land, and prior to that, he had spent 60 years in the Cloud Cave Blessed Land to quell a massive bout of unrest, sustaining severe injuries in the process that required another 60 years of seclusion to recover from. Hence, he was unable to keep up with any worldly affairs. A span of 200 years was enough time for many generations to be born and perish among mortals, but for cultivators of Zhang Shangzhen's caliber, the passage of time wasn't something that they were particularly sensitive to. If he could take another step forward, his lifespan would be extended by at least a few centuries, perhaps even 1,000 years or more. Compared with the pursuit of immortality, everything else paled into insignificance. Zhang Shangzhen lowered his gaze slightly. The deities of Taoism were worshipped in Green Goat Palace, while the 3,000 steps of the Cinnabar staircase alluded to the 3,000 paths to the Great Tao. It sounded like there were many paths, but how many people could actually reach the very top? The Great Tao had a grand name, but that didn't entail that the path was wide. In fact, the higher one ascended, the narrower the path became, and it could even narrow to the point that only one person could pass through. However, Zhang Shangzhen knew what he was capable of, and he knew that no matter how far he progressed down a path, it would never become so narrow that only one person could pass through. He wouldn't have to battle the Ascension tier immortals ahead of him for a chance to fulfill his great Tao, nor was it necessary for those below him to have to force him off his pedestal in order for them to progress further. As for the identity of the swordsman that he had encountered out at sea, he would just have to consult the sect leader on this matter once he returned to the Jade Tablet sect. The sect leader always had exceptional sources, particularly when it came to trivial information, and he was the type of person who wanted answers to everything, even things like the colors of the dudas of the sect's new female disciples. Whenever an altercation broke out between elders of the sect, he would be sure to eavesdrop on them. Outside of the sect leader Zhang Shangzhen couldn't think of any other immortal tier cultivators who would stay in their manor all day, watching the seductive shows put on by all of the celestial maidens from smaller sects through the enchanted picture scrolls of those sections. In fact, the sect leader would anonymously send out large sums of lesser heat coins to those sects, and even sneak out of the sect to personally grant those women treasures and fated opportunities. Thanks to the annual profits that it was reaping from the Cloud Cave Blessed Land, the Jade Tablet sect was rolling in wealth, yet its sect leader was so shameless that he often approached Zhang Shangzhen to borrow money, complaining about how he was broke. He was also telling Zhang Shangzhen about how he had made a friend on Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, namely the leader of Invincible Divine Fist sect, and that he was going to visit this sect leader sometime soon, then veered off on a tangent about how much it pained him to see Celestial Maiden Su Jia suffer such a terrible fate on True Martial Mountain. At times, Zhang Shangzhen really couldn't understand how the old sect leader had managed to reach the immortal tier. The old sect leader virtually never spoke to Zhang Shangzhen about the Great Tao, but after he abandoned his identity as otherworldly immortal Zhou Fei and returned to the sect, the old sect leader gave him a long-winded lecture, telling him that he shouldn't be so cruel to women, and that the women of Springtide Palace in the Lotus Flower Blessed Land were all poor souls who had suffered extensively at his hands. After an extensive scolding, the old sect leader ordered Zhang Shangzhen to go to the West Sea to hunt down that great demon, and he didn't even give Zhang Shangzhen a single powerful treasure to help his cause, clearly indicating that he was truly angry at him. In contrast, as soon as Yora was brought back to the sect, she was immediately given several treasures from the old sect leader's private collection, but of course she was told that they were a gift from Zhang Shangzhen. The group of 6 made their way up the Cinnabar staircase, and Chen Ping'an was feeling rather perplexed as they hadn't encountered even a single other person thus far. He looked up at the top of the staircase, but the cloud and mist was still too dense for him to see Green Goat Palace. Pei Qian tugged on Chen Ping'an's sleeve, then said in a quiet voice, "There are 2 people standing up there, and it looks like they're waiting for us." Chen Ping'an's heart sank slightly. Could it be that the Great Quan Empire still wasn't willing to let him off the hook? Right at this moment, the 2 people on top of the staircase slowly emerged from the sea of clouds, as if they had noticed that they had been noticed. One of them was a handsome young man, while the other was an old man in a Taoist robe, and the latter was trailing along slightly behind the former, indicating that he was of lower status, maybe a servant. Qian Ping'an continued to scale the staircase in an unhurried manner with the azure sword suppressing talisman held between his index and middle finger. The two people appeared to be moving quite slowly, but they were actually extremely fast, and in just the blink of an eye they arrived on the step that was 7 or 8 steps above Qian Ping'an's. Pei Qian felt the young man to be a little familiar, and she ducked behind Qian Ping'an for cover. "Qian Ping'an, we meet again. Looks like our fates are rather closely intertwined," Zhang Shangzhen remarked. "Are you Zhou Fei of Springtide Palace or Zhang Shangzhen of Jade Tablet Sect?" Qian Ping'an asked. "Both," Zhang Shangzhen replied with a smile. He then turned to Lu Yong as he remarked, "You see? What a keen eye this young immortal possesses." Lu Yong had no response to this. "I didn't think you would come after me so soon," Qian Ping'an said with a smile. The smile on Zhang Shangzhen's face faded as he said with an earnest expression, "Qian Ping'an, whether you believe me or not, I can tell you right now that as far as I'm concerned, your bad blood with Zhou Shi and Yur is all in the past. I was waiting for you in the Lotus Flower Blessed Land as I wanted to see you before you left the Blessed Land, and extend an invitation for you to serve as a guest elder of our Zhang clan. There are many bountiful opportunities waiting to be uncovered in the Cloud Cave Blessed Land. And as long as you're able to claim them, I'm happy for you to take whatever you please. However, you insisted on killing Lu Feng and Zhou Shi, and I'll admit that I considered returning to Parasol Leaf Continent to hatch a plot against you. However, even after recruiting the help of a naturalist cultivator, I still wasn't able to find you, and I had other matters to attend to at the time, so I was forced to set this matter aside. But you still found me in the end, did you not?" Qian Ping'an sighed. A hint of surprise welled up in Zhang Shangzhen's heart. Even though Qian Ping'an had only recently left the Lotus Flower Blessed Land, it was as if he had become a completely different person. This change wasn't marked by any advancement in cultivation base. Instead, it could be seen in his mental state. He had climbed to the very top among all of the martial artists in the Lotus Flower Blessed Land, and that was not a feat that was to be looked down on. His martial arts cultivation base wasn't anything to write home about, but the burden of a certain Taoist priest's great Tao had been placed on his shoulders. Essentially, everything that Ding Ying had done was just another way for him to shirk his responsibilities. As for the 4 people behind Qian Ping'an, those were most likely the legendary historic figures of the Blessed Land. The woman with the sword on her back was most likely Sui Yubian, the female sword immortal that Lu Feng often mentioned, and Zhang Shangzhen had a rough idea of who the other 3 were as well, but he was unable to tell exactly who was who. His current theory was that the tall saber-wielding man was the martial arts maniac Zhu Lian, who was said to have been extremely handsome in his prime. The short and well-built man was Liu Baixiang, the founding father of the demonic orthodoxy, and the hunchbacked old man was the founding emperor of Southern Garden Nation, Wei Xian. Zhang Shangzhen was truly amazed that Qian Ping'an had been able to acquire such exceptional servants, but he wasn't overly envious. For pure martial artists, the most important thing was time. They had to make progress one step at a time, much like water dripping through stone, and in contrast with qi refiners, they didn't rely too much on aptitude or fated opportunities. Meanwhile, Lu Yong was becoming more and more anxious by the second. Judging from what Zhang Shangzhen had just said, it appeared that these two were sworn enemies. The young immortal's cultivation base wasn't particularly advanced, which meant that he had extremely powerful backers, to the point that even the leader of the Zhang clan was clearly a little wary of him. A smile suddenly appeared on Zhang Shangzhen's face as he said, "It's a huge relief to me that you're not displaying much animosity toward me. Let's talk while we scale the mountain." "Sure," Qian Ping'an replied, and the two of them began ascending the staircase side by side. Lu Yong was trailing along behind the two, while Pei Qian was walking on the same step that he was. However, she was making sure to keep her distance, and she was sneaking furtive glances at the old immortal. As soon as Lu Yong showed any sign of turning his head, she would immediately turn her gaze to the scenery in the distance while tapping her hiking pole audibly against the staircase. To Lu Yong's surprise, the more he looked at Pei Qian, the more potential that he saw in her. While it was true that he was absolutely useless in battle, he was still a nascent tier cultivator, and he could roughly gauge the cultivation aptitude in someone with just a glance or two. Zhang Shangzhen asked Qian Pingyan about his 4 servants, and Qian Pingyan named them one by one. Upon learning the truth, Zhang Shangzhen realized that he hadn't even guessed a single one of the 3 men's identities correctly, and he slapped a hand to his own forehead as he sighed. Looks like my eyes are no better than Lu Yong's. The atmosphere wasn't particularly heavy, and as opposed to a confrontation between sworn enemies, this seemed more like a reunion between old friends, or a pair of enemies deciding to make peace and let bygones be bygones. As for what was really happening here, that was something that only Zhang Shangzhen and Qian Pingyan themselves were aware of. Has your journey gone smoothly thus far? Zhang Shangzhen asked. Not really, Qian Pingyan replied with a shake of his head. I've gotten into some altercations with both of the princes of the Great Quan Empire. Zhang Shangzhen turned to Lu Yong before asking, what's the name of the Great Quan Empire's emperor again? Lu Zhan, Lu Yong hurriedly replied. Zhang Shangzhen turned back to Qian Pingyan as he said, I'll drag their father over here to apologize to you. Just wait a little, I won't be long. Perhaps you can enjoy a meal in Green Goat Palace, and once you're done, Lu Zhan will be standing right before you. However, the Great Quan Empire is overseen by Great Subduing Academy, and the Mountain Master of the Academy is a very prestigious figure. He comes from a sage's manor on Middle-earth Divine Continent, and his brother is the Mountain Master of a Confucian school, so you can do whatever you want to Lu Zhan, but make sure you spare his life. Otherwise, things will be a little awkward for both of us. Of course, you can definitely give him a beating to teach him a lesson. Zhanshan and Flying Dumpling's thoughts. There's no need for you to do that, Qian Pingyan said. Can you tell me why you've come all this way to meet me at the Heavenly Palace Peaks Ferry Station? Are you planning to capture me and take me back to Jade Tablet Sect? Zhang Shangzhen burst into laughter then replied, I did actually consider doing that on the way here. It was a real pain in the backside to find you, and I'd be lying if I said that I'm not feeling at least a little disgruntled. To tell you the truth, there are disciples of our Jade Tablet Sect cultivating over in Mirage City. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to wait here for you at Green Goat Palace. I stayed for a day in Mirage City to find out what you had been up to there, and I also paid a visit to the newly promoted head minister of the Ministry of Personnel with the Yao surname. I only took a glance at him from afar, and I instructed that disciple at Mirage City to help out the Yao clan where possible in the future. After that, I came all the way here to Green Goat Palace just to see you. Qian Pingyan stopped in his tracks upon hearing this. Zhang Shangzhen continued to make his way up the staircase as he said, I'll reveal everything to you once we reach the top. Qian Pingyan followed Zhang Shangzhen into the sea of clouds around the Heavenly Palace Peak, and all of a sudden, the clouds faded away, revealing a majestic palace on the summit of the Heavenly Palace Peak. As everyone made their way into the sea of clouds, Lu Yong tried to take the opportunity to take a better look at Pei Qian, but to his surprise, she was able to detect his gaze even with the dense cloud and mist in the area, and she looked away once again. This sea of clouds wasn't just a naturally forming cloud formation. Instead, it was the mountain protection formation for Green Goat Palace, and any mortal who entered it would be rendered completely blind, unable to see anything around them. Zhang Shangzhen continued onward in a graceful fashion, but after walking a few steps, he noticed that Qian Pingyan had remained still on the spot, and he turned around to discover a very peculiar look on Qian Pingyan's face. By the time Lu Yong, Pei Qian, and the others had all reached the mountain summit, Qian Pingyan was still standing completely still on the spot. Pei Qian turned her gaze to the same direction as Qian Pingyan, and she discovered that there were many people gathered in front of Green Goat Palace, and all of them seemed curious to see exactly who it was that was worthy of being personally received by both their palace leader and that powerful figure from Jade Tablet Sect. Most of the people looking on from Green Goat Palace were chi refiners quite young in age, and some of them were around the same age as Pei Qian. What are you looking at? Pei Qian asked. Qian Pingyan turned to Pei Qian and gently patted her head as he smiled and replied, I used to be just like them, standing at the entrance looking out at other people. After that, Qian Pingyan continued onward, following Zhang Shangzhen as they made their way toward the Immortal Ferry Station. Lu Yong took a glance at the disciples over at Green Goat Palace, all of whom were making fools out of themselves by gawking like idiots, and he scolded in a stern voice, Go back and cultivate. You're all embarrassments. After walking for about 2 kilometers, Chen Ping'an reached the Heavenly Palace Peaks ferry station. There was a giant luchuan docked at the ferry station, and there were countless azure birds circling around in the air beneath the luchuan, as if they were the ones keeping the luchuan aloft. This luchuan should have set off the day before for Old Dragon City, but it had been intercepted by Zhang Shangzhen, and as usual, he had used his astonishing wealth to accomplish this feat. Green Goat Palace didn't dare to accept Zhang Shangzhen's money, but all of the passengers on the ship had been issued sums of lesser heat coins equivalent to the fare that they had paid for this journey. Lu Yong had instructed one of Green Goat Palace's elders to hand out the money, and of course, there were some disgruntled passengers who weren't willing to accept the money or the delay. Green Goat Palace didn't dare to subdue those passengers by force, so it was left to Zhang Shangzhen to quell the dissenters. He flew onto the luchuan, then made an example out of a golden courtier cultivator from the northern region of Parasol Leaf Continent, slapping him down from the luchuan into Clear Realm Mountain down below. By the time Green Goat Palace's cultivators dug him out of the mountain, he was only just barely clinging onto his life. However, after learning that it was Zhang Shangzhen who had done this to him, he trudged his way arduously back up the mountain without even tending to his own injuries first, then apologized to Zhang Shangzhen, even though he was the victim in this scenario. Pei Qian was extremely excited to see the majestic immortal luchuan, and she was brimming with so much enthusiasm that she was almost unable to suppress the urge to unleash her self-created deranged demon sword techniques. This was also the first time that Wei Xian and the others were witnessing such a marvelous spectacle, and even though their expressions remained largely unchanged, they were all quite amazed internally. Zhang Shangzhen was standing by the ferry station as he smiled and said, "This is as far as I'll escort you." Chen Ping'an nodded in response. Zhang Shangzhen hesitated momentarily, then asked, "Can I ask who your master is?" Chen Ping'an smiled and remained silent. "I don't have any ill intentions, I'm just curious," Zhang Shangzhen said. Chen Ping'an shook his head as he replied, "I'm not trying to keep this a secret from you, it's just that strictly speaking, I don't really have a master. Old Man Yao was the one who had taught him how to fire pottery, Aoyang had taught him the 18 stops technique, Cui Chan's grandfather had taught him his fist techniques, while Mr. Qi and the scholarly sage had imparted upon him a vast wealth of wisdom. As for the ones who had taught him to be kind, that would be his parents." "All right, if you don't want to tell me, then so be it," Zhang Shangzhen sighed. "I came here to see you as I was requested by someone to pass on an item to you. I've placed the item in a container, and I suggest that you store it in a pocket treasure and refrain from bringing it out until you feel like you've reached a truly safe place." Over the course of his 2 journeys, Chen Ping'an had seen many incredible things, such as the time when those people had traveled 1,000 li to offer up their heads back in the Flying Eagle Fortress. However, there was undeniable bad blood between him and Zhang Shangzhen, and in his eyes it was clearly impossible that Zhang Shangzhen would come all this way just to deliver something to him. Zhang Shangzhen could see the wariness and skepticism in Chen Ping'an's eyes, and he stomped a foot down onto the ground to isolate the area around them, transforming it into an independent space, then asked with a wry smile, "You've heard of what happened in Planchette Writing Sect, right?" Chen Ping'an nodded in response. Zhang Shangzhen pointed at himself, then continued, "Even after that great demon was wounded, it was still able to flee into the West Sea thanks to its physical durability. I just so happened to be one of the 3 people sent to go after that great demon, and the other 2 were sect leader Songmao of Peace and Tranquility Mountain and some old fart responsible for looking after the genealogical records of Parasol Leaf Sect. Given how severe the great demon's injuries were, its fate was sealed, but that old fart from Parasol Leaf Sect and I were both reluctant to try and deliver the final blow for fear of a last-ditch act of desperate retaliation from the great demon. Hence, we decided to follow along after it at a leisurely pace and wear it down until it died. Along the way, we could do some sightseeing and have a nice chat with one another." Despite how casual and nonchalant Zhang Shangzhen sounded, Chen Ping'an knew that the hunt was definitely not as leisurely as he described it to be. Zhang Shangzhen turned to the west as he continued, "After that, the 3 of us encountered a swordsman. He truly possessed tremendous sword qi and an exceptional heroic spirit in equal measure, and on top of that, he was also very kind and easygoing. Not only did he slay the great demon with just a single slash of his sword, he was also patient enough to bless us with an insightful lecture, and he was so unselfish that he didn't claim even a single part of the great demon's body." Zhang Shangzhen's voice trailed off here and he sighed. Fine, I'll admit that was all a lie, but it really is true that he did slay the great demon with just a single slash of his sword. He asked us if any of us knew you, and I told him the truth. He didn't say much in response, but after he departed, he suddenly doubled back and declared that the demon core of the great demon was mine. That was all he said, and neither of my two companions dared to raise any objections, allowing me to harvest the precious demon core of that 12th tier great demon. Even though that swordsman told me that I could have the demon core, I know that it's not meant for me, and that's why I came here to give the demon core to you. I know him, his name is Zui Yu, Chen Ping'an replied. I've never heard of that name before. Could it be that he really is a young sword immortal who only emerged in the past 200 years? Zhang Shangzhen stared into Chen Ping'an's eyes, trying to see if he could glean any further information, but to no avail. All of a sudden, a beautiful vase that was around the same height as half the length of a human arm appeared in his grasp, and he asked, "Do you know how precious this demon core is? Do you know how powerful a swordsman has to be in order to slay a 12th tier great demon so easily?" Chen Ping'an shook his head, then nodded as he replied, "I don't know how much this demon core is worth, but I do know about Zui Yu's swordsmanship. He told me in person that his sword intent is inferior to Aoyang's, but his swordsmanship is superior to Aoyang's, and I believe him." Zhang Shangzhen's expression instantly stiffened upon hearing this, and he rubbed his hand over his own face in a defeated fashion. How could he be speaking so casually about someone who claimed to possess superior swordsmanship to Aoyang? Chen Ping'an could sense Zhang Shangzhen's apprehension, and he smiled as he reassured, "Rest assured, my quarrels with Zhou Shi and Yer don't have much to do with you. Besides, even if I were to beg Zui Yu to come after you, he wouldn't agree anyway." It was only with extreme reluctance that Zui Yu had accepted Chen Ping'an as his junior brother. Despite Chen Ping'an's reassurance, Zhang Shangzhen wasn't feeling any better at all. It wasn't that he didn't trust Chen Ping'an. Instead, the problem was that Zui Yu wasn't the type of person who needed a reason to go after someone. One day, he could simply decide to attack Jade Tablet Sect just because he was in a bad mood. After just barely withstanding Zui Yu's first sword strike, that old fart from Parasol Leaf Sect was so desperate to avoid having to face a second one that he was willing to completely abandon his own dignity. Zhang Shangzhen decided there, and then that it was best to stay far away from Chen Ping'an from this point onward. Chen Ping'an accepted the vase that contained the demon core from Zhang Shangzhen, then immediately stowed it away into his pocket treasure. "That vase is also quite a nice treasure. You can have it as an apology gift from our Jiang clan. As for whether you'll encounter Zhou Shi again in the future and what happens if you do, we'll just have to see when the time comes," Zhang Shangzhen said. Pei Qian took a glance at Chen Ping'an and Zhang Shangzhen, then turned her gaze elsewhere. Pei Qian was able to see the two of them, but was suppressing the urge to look, while Lu Yong, Wei Xian and the others weren't able to see them, so they didn't bother to look. Moments later, the two of them reappeared beside everyone, and Chen Ping'an made his way toward the Luchuan, followed immediately by Pei Qian and his 4 servants. After boarding the Luchuan, Chen Ping'an turned to Zhang Shangzhen as he cupped his fist in a salute and said, "We've had our differences in the past, but I still have to thank you." Zhang Shangzhen nodded in response with a smile on his face, and it had been a very long time since he had felt this relieved. An administrator from Green Goat Palace was already waiting for Chen Ping'an on the Luchuan, and he carefully led them to the top floor. Zhang Shangzhen continued to stare at the Luchuan in silence, and Lu Yong could only stand beside him, feeling very tense and awkward. Chen Ping'an's group were the only ones that the Luchuan was waiting for, so as soon as they boarded, the Luchuan immediately rose up into the air and began traveling northward. Zhang Shangzhen turned to Lu Yong as he asked, "It's not every day that such an esteemed guest comes around. Is your Green Goat Palace not going to offer anything to esteemed Immortal Chen as a gift?" "Of course, a gift is very much in order," Lu Yong hurriedly replied. "Would it be possible for you to enlighten me on what a suitable gift to give would be, senior? You're a nascent tier cultivator. Surely you don't need me to teach you how to present gifts to someone," Zhang Shangzhen sneered. Lu Yong was silent for a moment, then asked in a timid fashion, "What should I do if esteemed Immortal Chen refuses my gift?" Zhang Shangzhen turned away with a cold expression as he replied, "Then cry, beg, threaten to hang yourself, do whatever it takes to convince him. How could he possibly not accept your gift? Trying to take money from someone is one of the most difficult things you can do, but giving out money should be a breeze. If you can't even do that, then you may as well put an end to your own life. Lu Yong was sweating profusely as he said, "You're right, senior. I understand what I need to do. Regardless of what you give to Chan Ping'an, inform me of the price, and I'll compensate your Green Goat Palace double." Zhang Shangzhen harumphed coldly. An idea immediately occurred to Lu Yong upon hearing this, but Zhang Shangzhen seemed to have gleaned his thoughts, and he warned in a cold voice, "Don't try to get smart with me on matters like these. Report the exact value and don't try to give me any discount. You're not worthy of having me owe you any favors." Lu Yong hurriedly nodded in response. All of a sudden, a self-deprecating look appeared on Zhang Shangzhen's face, and he patted Lu Yong on the shoulder as he said in an amicable manner, "I just came to a realization just now, so I'm planning to stay an extra day in your Green Goat Palace. Pick out a few disciples, and I'll personally tell them about some matters related to cultivation. If there's a truly exceptional cultivation prodigy among those disciples, then I can give your Green Goat Palace a spot to enter the Cloud Cave Blessed Land. Having said that, make sure that they're all good-looking disciples. If you send a hideous disciple to me, I won't want to grant them this opportunity no matter how much aptitude they possess. I don't care how much aptitude someone possesses if I can't even stand the sight of them." Lu Yong was ecstatic to hear this, and for the first time, he extended an earnest bow of gratitude as he replied, "Thank you, senior. Your kindness won't be forgotten." Opportunity and calamity always came hand in hand on the path of cultivation, and it was important to be able to both weather calamities and capitalize on opportunities. Upon reaching the top floor of the Luchuan, Chan Ping'an's group of 6 were all assigned first-class rooms, and in particular, Chan Ping'an's room was ridiculously enormous. After claiming their jade tablets and keys, Wei Xian and the others continued to follow Chan Ping'an. Pei Qian tossed her hiking pole aside, then began running back and forth between the rooms in excitement. In the end, she made her way to the observation deck to look out at the sea of clouds, and there was a blissful look on her face as she stared blankly into the distance. Wei Xian had also gone to the observation deck, so Chan Ping'an was only accompanied by 3 of his servants. "Who was that young immortal just now, master?" Lu Baixiang asked with a smile. Zhu Lian rose to his feet before pouring a cup of tea for Chan Ping'an, and after accepting the cup of tea, Chan Ping'an replied, "That was Zhang Shangzhen, the leader of Jade Tablet Sect's Zhang clan. If I recall correctly, he seems to be an unpolished Jade tier cultivator, and he owns the Cloud Cave Blessed Land, an exceptional blessed land with a vast territory that's abundant with natural treasures. It's a complete travesty to claim that you don't have any connections in high places when you possess such powerful friends, young master," Zhu Lian praised. Sui Yubian took a glance at Chan Ping'an, then poured a cup of tea for herself. "He's no friend of mine," Chan Ping'an replied with a shake of his head. "So that was an immortal of the upper 5 tiers. Lu Baixiang sighed with a hint of longing in his eyes. Chan Ping'an had already given them a brief rundown of the cultivation base hierarchies for both pure martial artists and chi refiners. For martial artists there was the 7th tier, the Vajrabadi tier, the 8th tier, the far roaming tier, and the 9th tier, the mountain summit tier, which was considered to be the end tier by most martial artists. However, there existed a 10th tier, and even then, Chan Ping'an was telling them that the 10th tier was not the summit. For chi refiners, the middle 5 tiers consisted of the cave abode tier, the sea observation tier, the dragon gate tier, the golden core tier, and the nascent tier. As for the upper 5 tiers, the only known tiers were the unpolished jade tier, the immortal tier, and the ascension tier, while the names of the other 2 tiers had been lost for a very long time. Over on the observation deck, Pei Qian was beginning to grow a little bored of the spectacular scenery, and a forlorn look appeared on her face as she sighed. "Old man Wei, I want to tell you something that's been on my mind." Wei Xian was standing by the railing, and he nodded in encouragement. The observation deck should have been extremely windy, given the high altitudes that the Luchuan was traveling at, but all they could feel was a light and comforting breeze, indicating that there was most likely an immortal formation protecting the Luchuan. "My father still isn't willing to teach me any unrivaled sword techniques." Pei Qian sighed with a sullen look on her face. "You have to take things one step at a time," Wei Xian replied in a comforting manner. Pei Qian crouched down onto the ground with her back against the railing as she heaved a forlorn sigh. Wei Xian looked down at her and said, "It's all right, you'll still be your same mediocre self tomorrow, you just have to get used to it." Pei Qian looked up at Wei Xian with a resentful look in her eyes as she asked, "How did someone like you ever find a wife?" Wei Xian considered the question for a moment, then replied, "All of my wives were found for me by other people, but I wasn't able to marry the woman that I liked the most." "Why did she not want to marry you?" Pei Qian asked. "It's not your fault that you're ugly." Neither of them appeared to be particularly adept at consoling other people. Wei Xian rested his chin on the railing as he explained, "It wasn't because of my looks, she wasn't that good-looking herself. At the time my family was very poor, and I wanted to earn some big money before coming back to marry her. However, the world became a very chaotic place during that time, and she died while I survived." Wei Xian nodded in response. "That's true. Back then, there weren't many people around me who could see things as clearly as you do. All of the literary classics that they read didn't do them any good at all." "Old man Wei, what official position do you think I could have climbed to in the imperial court?" Pei Qian asked with an expectant grin. "Women can't become officials," Wei Xian replied. "And the way you look now, I suppose that when you're all grown up, you're still going to be very ugly, so even if you make it into the palace, you'll never get to see the emperor." Pei Qian kicked Wei Xian in the leg as she grumbled, "I didn't think you were such a bad person, old man Wei." Wei Xian merely chuckled in response. Recently, he had been in a rather bad mood, which was quite rare for him, but bickering with Pei Qian had improved his mood quite a bit. The reason for his foul mood was Qian Pingyan, but Qian Pingyan wasn't to blame. Ultimately, he could only blame his own curiosity, which had induced him to ask Qian Pingyan about the later history of Southern Garden Nation, particularly what the history books had to say about him. As soon as Qian Pingyan realized that something wasn't quite right about Southern Garden Nation, he had immediately read through many official and unofficial historic records, and there were naturally many records pertaining to the nation's founding emperor, Wei Xian. There were many legends surrounding Wei Xian's birth. For example, one story told of how Wei Xian's father had gone to work in the fields one day when he spotted his wife laying by the side of the road with a white dragon coiled around her, and not long after that, she gave birth to Wei Xian. Wei Xian stopped speaking to Qian Pingyan again after that. To his dismay, Pei Qian was there to hear it, and by the time Qian Pingyan finished his story, she was rolling on the floor, laughing so hard she was crying. Recently, she had often brought up this story to mock him, doing things like intentionally jutting out her belly as she walked to emulate a pregnant woman. In the end, she was given a stern tug on her ear and a solid flick to the forehead, and only then did she begin to exercise more restraint. In fact, she even gave Wei Xian an apology, but as she did so, she had her back facing Qian Pingyan, and she had been making funny faces at Wei Xian while delivering her apology. Wei Xian naturally wasn't going to get angry at a little girl, but that still didn't change the fact that he was in a bad mood. Pei Qian looked up at Wei Xian, then suddenly said, "I'm sorry, old man Wei, I won't make fun of you again." Wei Xian grinned as he replied, "It's fine, I'm not bothered. Honestly, this is nothing. There are many more things that the historians of Southern Garden Nation didn't even dare to make records of." "Like what?" Pei Qian asked in a quiet voice. "You can tell me. I'll keep it a secret." "Where do I even begin?" Wei Xian sighed. "Back in my hometown, my nickname was Rat. My family was really poor, so I used to have to steal in order to get by. After that, I even became a bandit and did many illegal and immoral things. As for my mother, she was never blessed by the presence of a white dragon. However, I have seen her cheat on my father with my own eyes, but I didn't say anything. He was a good man, a truly good man. In order to save me, he blocked the alley while that bandit hacked his back to pieces. Even so, he was still telling me to run. What else could I do? I ran. I tried to find his killer, but I wasn't able to in the end." Pei Qian heaved a forlorn sigh while making her way toward Qian Pingyan. All of a sudden, she sped up and began chortling, "Wei Xian's mother." Qian Pingyan immediately swung around, then snapped in a furious voice, "Shut your mouth. Go back and apologize." Pei Qian was so frightened that she instantly stopped cold in her tracks, and tears began to well up in her eyes as she immediately ran back to the observation deck. She was just about to apologize to Wei Xian when he smiled and patted her on the head as he consoled, "Don't cry, it's not a big deal. You can just treat me to some candy sometime." Pei Qian eagerly agreed to the offer, but she was still feeling very fearful, and after taking a timid glance at Qian Pingyan, she could tell that he was truly angry. She hurriedly threw her arms around Wei Xian's leg as she sobbed. You have to catch me if my father tries to throw me off the ship. Wei Xian heaved a resigned sigh, then turned to Qian Pinyin with a smile as he said, It's fine really. Qian Pinyin hesitated slightly, then nodded in response. After that, he rose to his feet and called out to Pei Qian, Get over here. The two of them made their way into the nearby study, where Pei Qian hurriedly closed the door, then hung her head in a pitiable display, bracing herself for whatever punishment Qian Pinyin had in store for her. Is Old Man Wei your friend? Qian Pinyin asked in a stern voice. Pei Qian considered the question for a moment, and she didn't dare to lie, so she gave an honest answer. He's half a friend of mine. She then hurriedly added, That's already a lot. Even Little Bai isn't half a friend of mine. Old Man Wei is the only one. What did those two books say about how you should treat your friends? Qian Pinyin asked. Pei Qian immediately recited a long list of principles laid out in the two books, such as treating friends with kindness, dignity, and respect. Have you done any of that? Qian Pinyin asked. That's just what the books say. You didn't say any of that, Pei Qian murmured quietly. Qian Pinyin was even more enraged upon hearing this. I know what I did wrong, Pei Qian said in a quiet voice. I shouldn't have made fun of Old Man Wei. Old Man Wei treats me with kindness and earnesty, and I should do the same. Qian Pinyin's expression eased slightly, but there was still a stern look on his face as he ordered, Take your book and go and read aloud from it on the observation deck. I've already memorized the book. Can I not take it with me? Pei Qian asked. Qian Pinyin immediately began to flare up with rage again, and Pei Qian hurriedly turned and fled from the room while expressing how necessary it was to take the book with her, and that failure to do so would display a lack of sincerity and respect to the wise man who wrote the book. Qian Pinyin heaved a faint sigh as the thought of Gu Qin sprang into his mind. On the observation deck, Pei Qian had the book raised before her with both hands, and she began reciting its passages without having to flip through the pages. As she pretended to turn the pages of the book, she turned to Wei Xian with a pleased expression as she said with a smile, Old Man Wei, my father seemed to be very satisfied with my admission of fault. Wei Xian gave her a thumbs up as a gesture of encouragement, and Pei Qian began swaying her head from side to side, clearly very pleased with herself. However, she was immediately struck by a slap to the head, and she didn't even dare to turn around as she sobbed, I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Julien nodded with a pleased expression, then walked away with his hands clasped behind his back as he remarked, Looks like you're not completely beyond saving after all. Pei Qian immediately swung around with an enraged expression, but before she had a chance to retaliate, she spotted Qian Pinyin making his way out of the study, and she hurriedly turned back around to continue reciting her book. As Pei Qian continued her recitation on the observation deck, Sui Yubian, Wei Xian, and Julien left one after another, leaving only Lu Baixiang and Qian Pinyin left, seated at a table across from each other. Are you not going to ask me about the phrase that I was told, master? Lu Baixiang asked with a smile. Qian Pinyin removed his sword nurturing gourd from his waist, then poured out 2 cups of wine and handed one of them to Lu Baixiang as he smiled and said, If you want to tell me, then tell me. Otherwise, it's not like I can force you to do anything. Julien had previously thought that Qian Pinyin's opinion of Lu Baixiang had changed because Lu Baixiang was the first one to reveal the phrase told to him, thereby making him the first traitor to have pledged his subordination to Qian Pinyin. However, on the contrary, Lu Baixiang was actually the only one of the 4 who was still yet to reveal his phrase. A peculiar look flashed through Lu Baixiang's eyes, and he took a sip of wine before speaking. Compared with the others, the phrase that was told to me is actually the most pointless one. It was, You're spending money like flowing water. Are you enjoying yourself? That does sound like something that person would say. Qian Pinyin sighed in a resigned manner. Can I stop calling you master? Lu Baixiang asked. No, Qian Pinyin shook his head in response. It makes me feel good about myself when you call me master. Lu Baixiang's jaw dropped. Not in 1,000 years had he expected this kind of answer from someone like Qian Pinyin. Instead, he had thought that there would be a very good chance that Qian Pinyin would agree to his request. Qian Pinyin then burst into laughter as he continued, That was just a joke, you don't have to call me master. Lu Baixiang rose to his feet and cupped his fist in a salute as he smiled and said, You have treated me with dignity and respect, and for that, you are worthy of my loyalty. Chen Ping'an also rose to his feet as he replied, "It would be much more fitting for Zhu Lian to say something like that, but it feels a little strange coming from you." Shortly thereafter, Lu Baixiang departed. Chen Ping'an sat on his own by the table for a long while before declaring, "Come over." Pei Qian had been reciting her book this entire time, and this was exactly what she had been waiting for. She immediately closed her book, then joyfully rushed back into the room and sat down onto a chair before pouring a cup of tea for herself as she complained in a raspy voice, "My throat is on fire." "You don't resent me, do you?" Chen Ping'an asked. "Huh? Why would I resent you?" Pei Qian asked with a genuinely perplexed expression. Chen Ping'an smiled and offered no response. A pitiable look appeared on Pei Qian's face as she asked, "Can I not make any transcriptions today? I'm really tired from climbing the mountain today." Chen Ping'an plastered a talisman onto her forehead as he declared, "You can have this treasure pagoda demon-suppressing talisman." Pei Qian was just about to yell out in elation when Chen Ping'an continued, "Go back to your room and make some transcriptions." Pei Qian thought about the trade-off for a moment and realized that this was still a very favorable deal for her. With that in mind, she slung her bag across her chest again, then skipped back to her room, while Chen Ping'an made his way out onto the observation deck. Sui Yubian was resting in her room with her eyes closed, and deep infatuation was placed on the table in front of her. After nurturing the sword for so long, she could clearly feel a burst of sword intent roaming within its scabbard. It was sword intent, not sword chi. In the wake of the battle on that stormy night, she had left the rundown temple with Chen Ping'an, and a conversation had unfolded between the two. Chen Ping'an had said some very blunt and callous things. "You don't have to repay these 2 gold essence copper coins. From now on, if Wei Xian, Zhu Lian, or Lu Baixiang spend any of my gold essence copper coins, I'll decide whether they have to repay me depending on the circumstances. However, you have to repay all of the gold essence copper coins that you use up from here onward. It doesn't matter when you return them. I'm just making this clear to you in advance so you don't feel blindsided in the future." He had also said some rather suspicious things. "You may think that I have no right to be speaking to you about cultivation and the Tao of the sword, but I can tell you right now that I've seen the 2 swordsmen who possess the most formidable swordsmanship and sword intent under the heavens. I haven't been practicing sword techniques for very long, but I already know where the pinnacle of sword intent and swordsmanship lie in this world, and all I have to do is get there step by step." Some of the things that he said were rather far-fetched. Your mentality is the most important thing when it comes to cultivation. All 4 of you once stood at the pinnacle of the lotus flower-blessed land at some point, and each of you have your own paths to walk. For example, you're fixated solely on becoming the best possible swordswoman, and the loftier your aspirations are, the more despair you'll feel now. However, trust me when I say that where there's a will, there will always be a way. In the end, Sui Yubian had asked Chen Ping'an why she was the only one that had to repay the gold essence copper coins that she used up, to which Chen Ping'an replied in a serious manner, "There's a girl that I like, and the next time I go to see her, she's going to check through all of my things. If there's a mismatch on the accounts, and it's because of another woman, how am I going to explain things to her?" The battle on the Sword Chi Great Wall had drawn to a conclusion. There were 2 moons hanging high up in the night sky. Ning Yao was seated on the city wall directly facing the 2 thatched cottages, looking out into space in an absent-minded manner with her skirt dagger and the locust wood sword sitting on her lap. The elderly sword immortal by the name of Chan Qingdu arrived by her side, then sat down with his legs crossed as he said, "Now that we finally have a window of respite, there's something I have to tell you." Ning Yao turned to him with an inquisitive expression. Chan Qingdu smiled as he said, "I was originally planning to give you lasting qi at some point in the future." Ning Yao opened her mouth to respond, but Chan Qingdu raised a hand to stop her as he continued. "However, this attack from the demon tribe was extremely strange, and I was worried that giving you the sword would only lead to disaster. It just so happened that Chen Ping'an was trying to reconstruct his bridge of immortality, so I instructed him to carry lasting qi to Parasol Leaf Continent to find the observing Tao Temple. Before I did that, I told him in private that carrying lasting qi would grant him many benefits, but even more negative consequences, as he would have to shoulder the burden of the karmic ties between you and the demon tribe." For the first time, a very different look appeared in his eyes. Even during his battle against Chao Ci, when we watched him lose 3 consecutive battles, His eyes weren't that bright. It was truly a memorable sight. Chen Qingdu then turned to Ning Yao as he asked, "Why are you not angry at me for making him take on such a perilous burden?" "Why would I be angry?"
Ning Yao countered.
"I am Ning Yao, and he is Chen Ping'an." She had made this declaration in an extremely proud manner, as if she were saying that she wasn't surprised in the slightest that the man who had captured her heart would be willing to do this. Chen Qingdu jumped down from the wall, then made his way toward the thatched cottages as he sighed. "What a pain to have to cop a sword blow this late at night. Then again, I suppose I brought this upon myself." Ning Yao rested her chin on her hands, and she began to think of Chen Ping'an as a proud smile appeared on her face. "I really picked an exceptional man, didn't I?" All of a sudden, her brows furrowed slightly as she recalled a conversation with Chen Ping'an back in his house on Clay Vase Alley, and she abruptly exclaimed, "Hold on a second, that makes me the scatterbrain." She rose to her feet and stowed away her skirt dagger and the locustwood sword, then began to emulate Chen Ping'an, walking as she practiced fist techniques, and she declared to herself, "With just a single hand, I can beat up 500 sword immortal Chen Ping'an." She then stopped in her tracks before turning to Savage World with her arms crossed in front of her chest, and she yelled, "I bet you're all pissing yourselves right now." Chen Qingdu couldn't help but burst into laughter. If there really did come a day when Ning Yao could beat up 500 sword immortal Chen Ping'ans with just a single hand, then everyone in Savage World would truly be pissing themselves. Back at the Heavenly Palace Peaks ferry station, Zhang Shangzhen had asked Chen Ping'an a question. "Why do you care about Green Goat Palace disciples' perception of you? Are you trying to leave them with a good impression? Is that really necessary?" Zhang Shangzhen was naturally able to see through the illusions, and he could tell just how remarkable the golden Dao robe and the sword-nurturing gourd were. However, what had truly caught his attention was the ordinary-looking white jade hairpin in Chen Ping'an's hair. Upon closer inspection, he had noticed the inscription on the hairpin. "Amiable as jade should a virtuous person be." Prior to reaching Old Dragon City, Green Goat Palace's Luchuan had to make 3 stops in between, the first of which was the Everspring ferry station outside Parasol Leaf Sect, which had spring-like conditions all year round. The Luchuan stopped at the 3 ferry stations for a total of close to 10 days, but all Chen Ping'an wanted was to get to Old Dragon City safely, so he forbade Pei Qian from leaving the ship to go visit the shops in the ferry station. Hence, she could only carry a stool onto the observation deck, then sat down on it as she watched the vibrant scenes of the 3 ferry stations with a look of yearning in her eyes. Occasionally, Wei Xian would join her for a brief chat. Even though Chen Ping'an didn't leave the Luchuan, he requested the old Green Goat Palace administrator on the ship to help him buy many things, and Wei Xian and the others also each gave the administrator a shopping list. Wei Xian requested some books detailing the customs and traditions of the different areas. Lu Baixiang purchased an imperial guqin that had come from a mortal empire. Sui Yubian made no requests, continuing to maintain the stance that all she needed was her sword, while Zhu Lian requested a long list of books. However, his book list was denied by Chen Ping'an before it could make it to the Green Goat Palace administrator, and told him that the books that he wanted weren't sold in the ferry stations, so he would just have to look for them on his own once they reached Old Dragon City, much to Zhu Lian's disappointment. As it turned out, Zhu Lian had requested a bunch of novels, and just the names of these novels alone were enough to make Chen Ping'an's skin crawl. There was no way that he would allow the book list to make it into the hands of the administrator. Aside from practicing his walking, standing, and sleeping meditation, Chen Ping'an had also been diligently practicing the sword techniques in the proper sword scripture. On top of that, he was also studying that immortal mantra. Even though the immortal mantra was extremely advanced, the main problem that people encountered in tool refinement was a lack of good materials, thereby rendering all of their skills useless. The phrase that the old Taoist priest from the Observing Tao Temple had passed on to Lu Baixiang, the one about spending money like flowing water, was of course a jibe, but it also reflected the unavoidable reality of tool refinement. At this point, his bridge of immortality had been mostly reconstructed, and the gates were wide open to accept guests from all directions, so the more abundant the spiritual energy in the surrounding environment, the more danger he would be in. That was why he had taken a fall on the stone arch bridge on Clear Realm Mountain. At the time, he was still unable to fully control his golden sweet wine to ward off the influx of spiritual energy, and the spiritual energy had clashed with his true qi, thereby resulting in a loss of balance. Ultimately, there was an upper limit to the amount of spiritual energy that golden sweet wine could absorb and convert at a time, and if it were to reach full saturation, then the excessive spiritual energy would be able to flood into all of Qian Ping'an's acupoints, resulting in a fall in his martial arts cultivation base. The current conundrum that Qian Ping'an was facing was deciding which treasure he was going to refine in his first acupoint. If he were to choose water out of the 5 elements, then the process would be relatively simpler, as the example set by the burial river goddess was precisely one of refining water. The rain-praying tablet detailed the process involved, as well as the materials required for water refinement, and special emphasis was placed on a key item by the name of water essence. All treasures that were a culmination of the essence of the fortune of a body of water could be referred to as water essence, but different water essences could vary drastically in caliber. The water essence of a small river overseen by a river guardian and the water essence of a river that was home to an ancient dragon palace could hardly even be compared to one another. It was no exaggeration to say that the caliber of the water essence used for refinement would directly determine the caliber of Qian Ping'an's water attribute bonded item. The Luchuan was docked at the Everspring ferry station, and Pei Qian was seated on her stool on the observation deck, looking out at the ferry station with a forlorn look of yearning in her eyes. Meanwhile, Qian Ping'an was seated by the table, and he was also feeling a little forlorn as he looked at the adorable water seal on the table. After gaining an in-depth understanding of the immortal mantra, it had occurred to him that if he were to refine the water seal as his bonded item, then there was a very good chance that every time he used the seal to help a water god improve their waterway luck, his essential energy would be harmed. However, the main benefit of refining the water seal as his bonded item was that the seal would no longer expend a part of its mystical power every time that it was used, so there would no longer be any danger of the seal being reduced to just an ordinary seal that held no mystical power. Hence, Qian Ping'an had decided that this water seal was what he was going to refine as his water attribute bonded item. This was going to be a bonded item, so it was going to be different from the demon binding chains refined using Flood Dragon Golden Whiskers. Due to the special nature of this refinement process, he was going to require a cauldron for tool refinement, and that was going to be a massive headache in itself. He had to find an immortal seller willing to part with a good cauldron, and he had to purchase it. That task could be easy or it could be ridiculously difficult. It all depended on how much money he had in his pocket. I don't have any money now. A grief-stricken look appeared on Qian Ping'an's face as this thought occurred to him. He didn't have a single grain rain coin left, and now that Jewel Small World no longer existed, there would no longer be any new gold essence copper coins. In other words, they were now a finite resource, and he had just used up 2 of them during that battle on the mountain summit. If it had been any of the 3 men as opposed to Sui Yubian who had thrown away their lives so recklessly, then Qian Ping'an would have really been tempted to give them a good beating. Pei Qian carried her stool back into the room, then sat down beside Qian Ping'an with a concerned expression as she asked, "What's wrong? Are we out of money?" She had managed to strike the nail right on the head. Qian Ping'an turned his gaze to Pei Qian with slightly furrowed brows, and he couldn't help but wonder how she seemed to always be able to find the most hurtful things to say. Pei Qian thought that Qian Ping'an was beginning to grow sick of having to cover her expenses, and her little face immediately puckered up as tears welled up in her eyes. "Please don't throw me off the ship. I won't demand to eat fish and meat anymore. From now on, I can get by with just a bowl of meat and some pickled vegetables a day." Qian Ping'an smiled as he reassured. "It has nothing to do with how much you're eating. You're at an age where you're still growing, so eat as much as you can. It's not like a few extra bowls of rice costs that much anyway." A bright and vibrant smile instantly appeared on Pei Qian's face as she asked, "Do we have a place to stay in Old Dragon City? If we do, then we'll have someone to cover our costs." Qian Ping'an nodded as he replied, "We do. I have a friend over there who's quite wealthy, but don't take advantage of their generosity and make unreasonable demands, do you hear me?" "I won't," Pei Qian replied in a sullen manner. She had thought that they would be able to meet someone else like Yao Jinji, who gave her everything that she wanted and even begged her to accept her gifts. Most importantly, Qian Ping'an was unable to refuse her. If she had known that people like Yao Jinji were so few and far in between, then she wouldn't have made fun of her that one time. The 2 of them were chatting with each other when Yao Jinji removed her veiled hat to reveal her fair and delicate skin, which made Pei Qian feel very inferior and self-conscious in comparison. She couldn't remember what they had been talking about at the time, but in order to make herself feel better, Pei Qian had directed an insult at Yao Jinji under the veil of a tongue-in-cheek compliment. "Big sister Yao, you're so beautiful that it's no wonder you're a bit of a scatterbrain." Yao Jinji hadn't gotten mad at her for that comment, merely poking her on the forehead instead like a doting big sister. One day passed by after another, and before long, it was already the winter solstice. At this point, the ship had left Parasol Leaf Continent and was currently flying over the sea between the two continents. By the time it reached the ferry station on the island outside Old Dragon City, it was already late winter. One day during the course of the journey, Lu Baixiang was watching Qian Ping'an practice his monotonous walking meditation in his room, and he asked, "This fist stance looks very ordinary. Why do you practice it so persistently? Lofty heights can be reached even from lowly foundations," Qian Ping'an replied, and Lu Baixiang fell into deep thought upon hearing this. After Lu Baixiang left the room, Pei Qian quietly asked Qian Ping'an what the meaning of his response was, and Qian Ping'an had smiled and told her that he couldn't think of a profound answer, so he had made one up on the spot. In his experience, those who excelled in playing Go often like to overcomplicate things, so he was leaving the meaning up to Lu Baixiang's own interpretation, and Pei Qian had found this explanation to be utterly hilarious. On this day, Qian Ping'an was sitting in his study, raising his brush before putting it down over and over again. Pei Qian was seated across from him, making some transcriptions, and she was becoming more agitated by the second. In the end, Qian Ping'an left the room to pay Julien a visit, but following his return, he became even more hesitant and indecisive before ultimately deciding to put away his brush and paper altogether. Pei Qian was very perplexed to see this. The two letters that he had sent to Great Subduing Academy and Peace and Tranquility Mountain by Flying Sword had both been written very quickly, so who could this letter possibly be addressed to? Qian Ping'an arrived on the observation deck to practice his standing meditation. Right at this moment, the sound of door knocking rang out, and Pei Qian rushed over to open the door. Upon catching sight of the visitor, she extended a respectful bow as she greeted. Pei Qian pays her respects to esteemed immortal Lu of Green Goat Palace. The old man standing outside was none other than Lu Yong, and he smiled and nodded in response. Qian Ping'an hurriedly entered the room to meet Lu Yong, and after the two of them had taken a seat, Pei Qian quickly poured 3 cups of tea, one for Qian Ping'an, one of Lu Yong, and of course one for herself. Instead of immediately revealing the purpose of his visit, Lu Yong spoke in a very roundabout manner, making small talk with Qian Ping'an for close to 15 minutes. Qian Ping'an could only remain patient and play along, chatting with Lu Yong in an amicable fashion. Earth immortals were not to be taken lightly. Having traveled to so many places, Qian Ping'an was fully aware of what an Earth immortal entailed, and he didn't look down on Lu Yong just because he knew Zui Yu and could speak on equal terms to Jiang Shangzhen. This was a nascent tier immortal who presided over an incredibly rich and abundant area, as well as an immortal ferry station. To put it bluntly, if Lu Yong didn't have to worry about Qian Ping'an's backers and was determined to kill him, he could do it with the flick of a finger. Qian Ping'an's approachable and pleasant demeanor further improved the impression that Lu Yong had of him. Of course, Lu Yong was only doing this out of fear of Jiang Shangzhen, as well as the supposed backers behind Qian Ping'an that made even Jiang Shangzhen wary of him. Otherwise, even if Lu Yong couldn't afford to make an enemy out of Qian Ping'an, he could simply ignore Qian Ping'an, and there would be no need for him to suck up to Qian Ping'an and come all the way here in person just to present a gift. After taking a few sips of tea, Lu Yong finally declared the purpose of his visit. "Our Green Goat Palace was truly blessed by your presence on the Heavenly Palace Peak that day, young Master Qian. At the time, I just so happened to have been refining a cauldron of seated meditation pills. These pills are very warm and mild in nature, and they're best taken by cultivators during seated meditation. Not only can they calm the mind, most importantly, they can nurture the body, particularly the acupoints. As for why they're called seated meditation pills, there's a rather crude yet accurate explanation for this, which is that after taking one of these pills, just sitting down alone will already be a form of cultivation, and it won't matter even if you don't actively focus on cultivation." As soon as he began speaking about pill refinement, Lu Yong was immediately brimming with enthusiasm, and he looked like a completely different person compared with the timid and uneasy old man who had been standing before Jiang Shangzhen. The heart is the master of the body and the general of all emotions. However, the heart has always been a very difficult concept to pinpoint. In Buddhism, there is a notion that an unsteady heart leads to a wandering mind. Hence, a still and steady heart is key to cultivation. Seated meditation pills are extremely difficult to refine, and even if they're successfully refined, 10 pills worth of ingredients will only be able to yield 3 or 4 pills at most. In addition, there's one thing that sets my seated meditation pills apart from all others, and it's an important reason they are so popular among all of the earth immortals of Parasol Leaf Continent. You see, consuming a seated meditation pill refined by me can give rise to something similar to the door gods plastered to the doors of the mortal households, serving the purpose of guarding one's heart. That's a fine testament to both your mystical powers and your pill refinement expertise. Chan Ping'an praised him in an earnest fashion, and Lu Yong was very pleased with this compliment. Of course, he didn't actually just so happen to have been refining this batch of seated meditation pills. In order to refine this pill, not only was a long list of natural treasures required, the timing had to be right, and some of the precious fortune of Clear Realm Mountain also had to be expended. This was the reason why these pills were so highly sought after among the golden core and nascent tier earth immortals of Parasol Leaf Sect. As for why other pill refinements masters couldn't refine seated meditation pills of the same caliber, Lu Yong's masterful pill refinement expertise was indeed a factor, but the fortune of Clear Realm Mountain played a far more important role. This was why earth immortals were always extremely meticulous and careful when it came to the site selection of their sex and manners. You just mentioned that these pills are highly treasured even by the earth immortals of Parasol Leaf Continent. In that case, are they fit for consumption for pure martial artists of the 6th and 7th tiers as well? Chan Ping'an suddenly asked. Lu Yong faltered slightly upon hearing this, then nodded as he replied, "Of course, it's just that it would be a massive waste to give these seated meditation pills of mine to those uncouth ruffians. It would be like feeding peonies to a cow." Chan Ping'an smiled as he asked, "Have you mentioned these seated meditation pills because you want to sell them to me at a discounted price in light of my ties with Jiang Shangzhen?" Lu Yong was stunned to hear that Chan Ping'an dared to refer to Jiang Shangzhen directly by name, but his expression remained completely unchanged as he replied, "That was never my intention, young Master Chan. You're a cherished guest of our Green Goat Palace. I can't demand any money from you in exchange for my pills. After you and Senior Jiang left the Heavenly Palace Peak, it was as if I had been blessed by the heavens, and I was able to refine as many as 6 seated meditation pills in a single batch, something that's never happened before in all my past centuries of pill refinement. Such blessings only present themselves once or twice in one's lifetime, perhaps not at all, so it was immediately clear to me that you most definitely have exceptional affinity with my Green Goat Palace and myself. It would be a blatant act of ingratitude if I were to keep these pills to myself, which is why I've brought the 6 seated meditation pills to you today, young Master Chan." Pei Qian was looking on with her mouth slightly gaped open. Never did she think that she would encounter someone even more shameless and adept at lying than herself. She suddenly felt like she had much to learn from this old immortal, at least in the art of sucking up to others. Lu Yong seemed to have also realized that he had gone a little overboard and come across as overeager, so he put on a slightly forlorn facade as he continued, "Nevertheless, I must admit that it still pains me somewhat to have to part with these pills. In exchange, I hope that you can put in a good word with Senior Jiang for me and my Green Goat Palace. The Jiang clan does business across the entire Parasol Leaf Continent, so if they decide to purchase some pills from my Green Goat Palace in the future, perhaps I'll be able to make additional profits in excess of the value of these 6 seated meditation pills, and that would be a win-win situation for everyone. Hence, you can accept these pills without any qualms, young Master Chan. Even if my Green Goat Palace isn't blessed with more business from the Jiang clan, it'll still be more than worth these 6 pills to befriend someone like yourself."